Good afternoon. It's now 1 p.m. and the Senate Finance Committee is in session. We will start with Senate Bill 554. Senator Patterson, if you want to come forward, you may either sit at the table or speak at the mic, or you may stand at the podium.
Fine. When you get 20 now, you probably take 10.
All right, now I'm going to call your panelists before you get started.
Okay.
Okay. Christopher Dews is the person that the sponsor has chosen. Is Christopher Dews here? All right. Well, go ahead and get started, Senator Patterson. We'll direct Mr. Dews to join you when he comes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Kelly and Vice Chair and members of the Finance Committee. It's a very simple and straightforward bill that I have before you this afternoon. Senate Bill 554 is designed to provide a grant program to help those incarcerated individuals who may have ended on the wrong track through whatever cause that it may have will present to us this afternoon, and explain a little bit more about this bill. Basically, what the intent of the bill is to establish a grant program, if you will, to provide some skills for those who may be coming back into the workforce on how to operate small businesses, to get them a little ups on trying to get back into the mainstream of life through becoming entrepreneurs and other business owners throughout the state. The bill is sort of capped at not more than $50,000 per individual. Monies basically will be focused on training and providing some expertise on how to own and operate a business. So that's basically a summary of the bill, but I want to make sure that the fiscal note you talk about here, the financial note, is not a mandated as appropriation has indicated, but sort of an estimate as to what the bill may cost. That's up to this committee to decide how and if you want to bring that into the discussion. I guess the other good thing this afternoon is that with me today is a very strong and excellent panel who championed this cause for many years. I think it was before your committee, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And when you get involved in this business, you don't stop. You may run up against a steel door. You just cut half of it down and come back come back again the next time around. But anyway, I'm happy to do it. And some of you probably know this has been sort of a champion of my own in terms of trying to help those who have made a mistake. And I honestly believe that everyone deserves a second chance. And that's basically what this bill will do, and Mr. Dews and several others will be here to further talk about this bill and be available in case you might have some questions. Regrettable, Madam Chair, we're dealing with climate change in my committee. Need to get back down there if it's the willing of this committee with no sharp questions that I need to respond to.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Senator Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Patterson, the Department of Corrections submitted testimony. It was just informational. It sounds like they're already doing reentry programs. But one of the things that was highlighted in some of the response testimony, have you and the fiscal note that identified like that it would might mandated funding, you already identified that. Have you had an opportunity to talk to the department in reference to the revenue that's generated by MCE, which they generate, I think, about $59 million a year, which could be provided as a resource to help fund this?
Well, I talked with the representative for correction system, had a meeting last week to sort of talk about how we might go about getting additional funds. They got a NOMA program. A number of people in the General Assembly got legislation coming up that speak to the same subject. And I know last year they were willing to help us with the program that I sponsored with HBCUs, developing IPEAs and getting them ready to come back into the workforce.
Yeah.
So,
Please talk into the mic, Mr. Smith.
oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. Oh, okay. But specifically, the question you raised, I have not have to get that information, and they will be contacted immediately.
Yeah, I would just encourage you, as opposed to creating another, trying to identify a source of funds.
Yeah.
There's already a source of funds that's equivalent to this, and
Okay.
it may serve your purposes.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of the sponsor? All right. If not, then did Christopher Dews arrive? Okay. If not, then we're going to the other. Okay. Edmund Freeman. Okay. We understand, Mr. Sponsor, you say that
Okay.
you need to
All right.
return to your committee.
Thank
Okay. Senator Augustine, did you have a question for the sponsor?
No, I just was hoping that we would clarify that folks are going to be wearing their masks when they're
Oh.
in the committee and
Right.
testifying, just to let everybody know that that's the intention for the day, that we do that
Thank
the
you.
entire time.
Thank you. All right. What about Nicole Hanson? Tiana Johnson? All right. Seeing none of those persons present at this time, that ends the testimony on this bill. Thank you. We're going next to Senate Bill 453, Senator McCray, Economic Development Maryland Marketplace Initiative Program. Now, you have a panel, and we'll call up your panel members as soon as you have completed introducing the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Just want to first start, for the record, I'm Corey McCray, Senator over in the 45th Legislative District, and I just want to make sure that each and everybody in finance know that I will be keeping my mask on. I come to you all on a bill that I've had in for 3 years. Last year, you all did have the great insight and wisdom to make sure that this bill moved forward. This was our makerspace bill, Senate Bill 453. My challenges was not in the Senate, the great Senate. They were met, Madam Chair, in the House of Delegates. But I do feel confident that I work with my colleagues over in the House of Delegates, specifically the Majority Leader, Eric Lukey, to make sure that we have a product that can get through both chambers successfully. What this makerspace bill does is I'm very, very fortunate to have a building called OpenWorks in my respective district. It's been phenomenal. They've actually had 5 years of success. This is where you see our young people. This is where you see our old people. And I think my colleagues not say old, seasoned people, working with wood, sewing, things of that nature. And it's a very, very creative space. It rejuvenated a neighborhood that we call Johnson Square, which is up on the rise at that moment. But this was an opportunity to place something there that wasn't, and create economic opportunity for the folks that come under that hub. This is where we have one umbrella, so under a roof, you have all of these different smaller companies that collectively come together to make sure that we move in the right direction. It's been a jewel in the 45th District. I know that they've also went up to Western Maryland, so Western Maryland just opened their own makerspace. But the reality is this is supported across the board. I saw our county executive from Montgomery County out there. I know that Jake Day, the mayor of Salisbury, also is supportive. I know that Johnny O in Baltimore County. I know that Calvin from Howard County. All of these folks have collectively come together in a bipartisan way because they know that from an economic standpoint, Madam Chair, that we have a unique opportunity to move forward. This bill also sets aside funding for a certain amount of years so that TEDCO can appropriate and make sure that we have a path forward. It's supported by TEDCO. Madam Chair, I could belabor and talk and talk and talk, but I will not talk and talk and talk. I'm going to let the folks that do it best, that put this together, come up and make sure that we do a rousing presentation so that we can get this out of the Senate again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the sponsor? All right, if not, then we will call up his sponsor panel, Stephen Arville, Nicole Sullivan, and Dorothy Jones Davis. You will have 2 minutes each. You may go in whatever order you would like. Just state your name, please.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Allville. I'm the Chief Program Operations Officer for TEDCO. I'm here on behalf of my organization in support of Senate Bill 453. I'd like to thank the bill sponsors, Senators McCray and Edwards, for their vision to expand Maryland's innovation infrastructure. At TEDCO, we understand the importance of infrastructure and supporting infrastructure needed to support entrepreneurs and startup companies. Makerspaces are a key part of that infrastructure. Makerspaces provide the tools and equipment needed for entrepreneurs to create prototypes and to develop products. They foster the creation of small businesses that use these resources for small batch manufacturing. They provide technical training for folks to develop their workforce, and they inspire ingenuity in the young and the young at heart, and they create the next generation of entrepreneurs in our community, and we need more entrepreneurs. OpenWorks, TEDCO has been a supporter of OpenWorks. They're a national leader in this maker initiative, and they are a strong partner and will work with us to help distribute the best practices across the state. This bill fits with a larger vision that TEDCO has of a more coordinated innovation infrastructure in Maryland. Makerspaces are one component of that infrastructure, along with incubators and other resources. The stitching together of these components will strengthen our region's ability to support entrepreneurs and compete nationally. For these reasons, TEDCO is supportive of this bill and requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask if you could give us an example of one company that reflects this new model, something you funded?
I think we're going to hear from one of these companies, but I can tell you when I've gone into OpenWorks, and one company that sticks in mind of I believe it's a woman-owned company who was developing, using the materials there to develop backpacks for dogs. So you could take your dog out, they can carry their own water, sort of thing. And she created a little business. She was housed in OpenWorks, and I think I think you're going to hear more about that, more other companies, other examples.
Thank you. All right. What about Nicholas Sullivan?
Greetings, Madam
Nicole,
Chair,
I'm sorry.
Vice Chair, and Committee. My name is Nicole Sullivan, and I'm the founder of Keppel and Kismet LLC, a small manufacturing company in Baltimore City. I am here on behalf of OpenWorks in favor of Bill SB 0453, the Makerspace Initiative Pilot Program. Keppel and Kismet is one of these businesses. We utilize woodworking and digital fabrication skills to manufacture small consumer goods, including earrings like the ones I'm wearing, wood signs, and craft kits from kids to adults. We also work with other creatives to manufacture goods for their own product offering, helping others gain access to the marketplace. After almost 2 decades of making as a side hustle, I decided to make the leap to full-time entrepreneur. I learned of OpenWorks in January of 2018. After learning of the classes and equipment available, I signed up for a tour and started taking classes. Among my first classes were Laser Safety and Adobe Illustrator. These are the 2 classes that helped me launch my business and are the foundation of my business today. In May 2018, I established Keppel and Kismet LLC as a registered business. Later that summer, I was selected for a business accelerator program that was run out of OpenWorks called Moms as Entrepreneurs. That helped me to launch an Etsy shop in December of 2018. In December 2021, I won first prize in the OpenWorks Enterprise Business Pitch Competition. I've continued to learn and expand my skills because of what OpenWorks offers. Without OpenWorks, my business would not be where it is today, an established business continuing to experience growth. The skills I need to operate my business, I learned at OpenWorks, and I continue elevating those skills there. The machines and tools I need to manufacture the products I sell, I use regularly at OpenWorks. My entrepreneurial journey has been and continues to be fueled by all of what OpenWorks provides, including a supportive, creative community of makers. Thank you for hearing my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? All right, I don't see any yet. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
And we'll hear next from Dorothy Jones-Davis.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you everyone for hearing me today. Nation of Makers is a national nonprofit proudly located in Silver Spring, Maryland, that is committed to supporting America's maker organizations through community building, resource sharing, and advocacy. In support of our mission, we are proud to partner with local maker organizations such as OpenWorks that are having a significant economic, social, and cultural impact within their community to create opportunities for all Americans to succeed through making where they live. OpenWorks has quickly grown into a national leader in the maker movement, demonstrating the ability of makerspaces to deliver economic impact, diversifying a field that has seen historically low representation of ethnic and racial minorities and women, and delivering high-quality educational programming and fabrication, design, and entrepreneurship to learners of all ages and backgrounds in Maryland. Additionally, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, makers responded across the country to fill critical supply shortages, producing and distributing over 37 million units of medical supplies across the United States. For example, OpenWorks, through its Makers Unite program, produced 28,270 face shields for over 100 local clients, from local hospitals to federal agencies. As a leader of the national maker movement, I know that makerspaces are critical, not only in emergencies, but because they deliver just-in-time, accessible, community-based education and training that results in new jobs, new businesses, and new avenues for economic and community prosperity. The proposed legislation creates a non-lapsing fund to be administered by TEDCO that would support the establishment of a network of makerspaces in the great state of Maryland. Creating a network of 5 makerspaces across the state of Maryland could produce $45 million in annual economic impact, $2.2 million in annual tax revenues, and 600 jobs through direct employment and startup business creation. It could address the diverse workforce needs of manufacturers and tech companies across the state, educate 6,700 adults and 150 youth annually, at least, and create a civil manufacturing reserve to provide supply chain resilience in case of natural disaster, terror attack, or pandemic. As the Executive Director of Nation of Makers and proud citizen of Silver Spring, I can say that I'm very excited for the promise of Senate Bill 453 and the positive economic impact it will have on our entire state. Constructing a makerspace network would immediately catapult Maryland into a national leadership role in cultivating an innovation economy and have profound implications on the next 25 years of economic growth,
I hate to
workforce
butt
development.
in, but we had 2 minutes each for each of you, and you're a bit over. If you could wrap up.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to
Did you
finish
wanna
the
finish
sentence?
your last sentence?
Yeah, that was the last sentence. Economic growth, workforce development, STEM educational excellence, disaster preparedness, and startup activity. For these reasons, I encourage a favorable vote on Senate Bill 453. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. Okay, thanks for the testimony from all of you. Mark Eldridge is the next, the Honorable Montgomery County Executive.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Brian Feldman and Ben Kramer from my own world down there. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak this morning. I'm a big fan of the makerspace movement. It offers the opportunity for us to provide jobs and training at different skill levels. We are, Montgomery County, we have incubator space highly focused on high-end production of things. The value of the makerspaces, and I've been to OpenWorks in Baltimore, is they serve the surrounding community. If you've been there and you see the people who come in and the skills they learn in development. I've seen people making metal screens for display. I've seen people making furniture. There's a guy in there who is making 3D printers. I've seen a room full of sewing machines, sewing clothes to a pattern driven by a computer. It is an amazing thing to see. And if we could bring things like that to Montgomery County, which is one of my goals, we've actually worked with I think it's Mr. Holman, who's the head of Open, he's the main guy I know at OpenWorks, about ideas for what we could do in Montgomery County. So I'm excited about this. So I want to be clear, I support Senate Bill 453. I really do think it's an economic development initiative that's going to reach a larger portion of the population than we're normally able to do, and it's going to develop skills that are really important. Montgomery County, I've seen some of our light industrial spaces. These are high-value jobs. You know, we tend to dismiss them because these are jobs where people get dirty, it's noisy, and everything else. They're dirty and noisy, and they make a lot of money. Go try to buy a stair rail from somebody putting metal together in one of these places. So I think it's important. I went to OpenWorks in 2019. I've been hoping to be able to replicate this in Montgomery County. We're doing a small project on the east side of the county, but I could put these in multiple locations in the county. The legislation reflects an idea, I think, whose time has come. And without a program like this, Maryland would not be capitalizing on the strength it has to compete regionally and otherwise. I'm looking forward to competing for the resources that will be made available through this bill. This isn't cheap. I know what they put into OpenWorks to make it happen. But if you look at the lives that it's affected and the business and products that it's created, it's a good investment. And it makes people feel that you're not only good about the project, but good about the community in which they live that's providing these kind of jobs and these kind of opportunities. So I'm looking forward to being able to take advantage of this bill. I know we have to compete, but I think we can make a case that Montgomery County has areas of our county that could use the same kind of benefit that this is going to bring all over the state. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today. I look forward to it passing this committee and passing the legislature. It would be a great day for Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the county executive? All right. Well, thank you for your testimony. Are you aware of any other counties in which this particular model is also being tried?
I mean, when we were looking at things, then we know they're around, but this is on a scale. I mean, OpenWorks is at a scale that I haven't seen. There are actually multiple projects in Baltimore that do similar things, but OpenWorks at a kind of a scale that's unique. And I think
we might want
the community.
to do a field trip during the interim. We're out of session. Maybe that's something we ought to take a look at.
I go to Baltimore on field trips because there are things happening in Baltimore that are worth replicating elsewhere, and this is just one of them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are we done with this one? Yes. Okay. All right, well, now we're going to go to Senator Lee, County and Municipal Street Lighting Investment Act, Senate Bill 376. Senator Lee, let's see.
Thank you, Madam
You've
Chair.
got one
I'm going to
lead
bring my
witness.
panel up because there are a lot of technical questions.
Just a minute. George Woodbury is listed as your lead person, so we'll ask him to come up.
Are you ready, Madam Chair? Thank you. Thank you so much. This is, okay. Ready?
Sure.
The County and Municipal Street Lighting Act is just merely enabling legislation to permit Maryland's local governments to hasten investment energy-efficient street lighting, resulting in a reduction of the state's carbon footprint and improve public safety and cost savings for municipalities on energy expenses and other priorities. It updates a law the General Assembly enacted almost 15 years ago in 2007. Unmitigated pollution and light pollution caused by streetlights are important issues and often overlooked in municipalities' costs and environmental conversations. But what should hit close to home are property taxes associated with this wasted energy. Nearly half of the city's energy costs, they come from streetlights that the city likely has no ability to update, control, leaving our taxpayers on the hook for potential cost savings valued in the millions of dollars for those larger jurisdictions, and along with the lost savings due to more energy efficient lighting is the opportunity lost to include
I'm
outlets.
going to butt in and suggest, I don't think that mic is working as well as the ones at the table.
Oh, do you want me to sit here? Okay,
Yeah,
sure,
do that.
sure.
We'd like to be able to
I know
hear
that
about
they
this.
usually require me. This one, Madam Chair?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's
Esteemed
better.
committee members, okay. So, getting back to what I was indicating, there is a sponsor amendment that was crafted after discussions with the staff of the Public Service Commission. You should have that document. If you don't, just come back to me. It has been made available for your review in a separate written submission. Delegate Al Core has been the champion of this effort in the House of Delegates for years, and we've worked collaboratively with the PSC staff to ensure that we catch up with our neighboring states with the models that they have employed that have been very successful. While we've discussed this issue with the utilities and the Public Service Commission staff, we have unfortunately yet to find a common ground required to move forward as a consensus, although we have agreed to use their existing dispute resolution system, which eliminates most of their opposition. So we still have been able to reach consensus on that. To highlight the value of judgment for you here today, I request that we view this from a public side of the equation, because this just isn't about private companies as much as it is about the public good. While the public good was privatized in many local areas, streetlights are clearly a public good, and public safety as technology, of course, advances. The public is being denied the latitude to avoid bad consequences with the old technology that exists right now, and unable to adopt new technology advantages unless they perhaps negotiate with the utility without any real true leverage. The state itself must use this leverage of the law to promote the public good here and now, and we can do this fairly and efficiently if we. The service that the utility companies provide are the result of negotiations that allow return on investment in exchange for a regulated monopoly. And we need lights on our streets for a variety of reasons. And the smart move is to invest in smart lights, or at least maintain control to make those decisions through a democratic process with measures of accountability that the private sector does not possess. And we don't need high tech in every feature, but we want to have at least that option to have good technology used appropriately for our own ends, and definitely for our constituents and our residents and utility customers. These light fixtures are more than just light than just producing a light bulb. They also serve as connections to the community. Utility pole light fixtures have the potential to be hubs for smart technology that provide additional public safety. Some of these technologies include gunshot detectors, air quality sensors, and other health tools and communications and opportunities like Wi-Fi hubs. The barrier that exists now to these innovative tools can be eliminated through this legislation. We take street lighting for granted, most of us. The use and maintenance of these fixtures is one of the largest energy expenses for county and municipal governments. Advances in street lighting technology have allowed for those costs to come down significantly across the country. Unfortunately, our Maryland cities and counties have not been able to enjoy the breadth of those benefits that those modern streetlights provide. And last we checked, Montgomery County, only 49 of the 28,000 utility-owned streetlights in the Pepco territory are of the efficient LED variety. And this bill allows those municipalities to upgrade and solve this problem by authorizing those local governments to assume ownership of the street lighting infrastructure and then partner with the private sector for upgrades. We have modeled the process of local governments assuming the ownership of lighting infrastructures on existing procedures that have been successful in other states like Washington, D.C., Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, and California. Among the provisions, local governments are required to compensate current owners of street lighting infrastructure at fair market price. And we just learned today that Rhode Island, that the program is very successful, and more than 80% of the state's streetlights are already converted with the LED, with the network controls. The energy savings are between 40 to 65%, and additional benefits is the improved illumination. So we need this legislation so that Marylanders can benefit from these energy-saving innovations that our other neighboring states have benefited from. For these reasons, I respectfully urge my colleagues to vote favorably on SB 376 as amended. And I'd like to turn it over to the expert, George Woodbury.
Let me ask you a question first. What would you say is the greatest impediment that the General Assembly would need to overcome in order to put this into effect?
We need to let the localities be able to buy their own lighting equipment.
Okay. All right. Are there other questions? Senator Jennings.
Like, just real quick, is this the same bill that Delegate Carr has put in several times?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier in
Okay.
my testimony, yes.
I was.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Jennings, we have made an amendment, though, to address some of the concerns by the PSC.
Okay. Are there other questions? Okay. Now we'll go to the witness, Mr. Woodbury.
Thank you. My name is George Woodbury, and I wrote the first legislation in the country that allows cities and towns to take over their streetlights in 1998 in Massachusetts, where I was the Director of Public Works. Since that time, I've assisted both Maine, Rhode Island, and New York with legislation, and I've been working with Delegate Al Carr here in Maryland. Over the past 24 years, I've helped 130 communities acquire their streetlights and convert them to LED technologies, and these communities are saving over $100 million a year. So cost savings are very significant for communities that do this. Secondly, streetlights, the new LED technologies have a wide variety of choices that you can make in terms of color temperature, how bright they are, whether they have controls, whether they have backlight shields, front light shields, and the like, none of which are currently being offered by the utility companies. So one of the reasons why you want to do this legislation is to give communities the choice so that they can decide how they want to light their streets. Thirdly, and most importantly, is that streetlights in the future are going to become an extremely valuable piece of real estate in supporting smart technologies. I'm in the process right now of working in Jamaica to put in some of these technologies to demonstrate their capabilities to help reduce crime, for example. These devices can monitor graffiti. They can monitor abandoned packages. They can help with parking management. People looking for parking represents about 30% of the traffic congestion in a downtown area, so you can help solve those problems. Streetlights, because of their location and their ubiquitousness throughout a city, are just an ideal platform. They have a ready power supply to them, so they can support these kinds of technologies. And it's my belief that the cities and towns need the right to be able to choose when and how to employ those technologies, and right now this is not available through the utility company. Utility companies have resisted this program, but all of the claims that they've made about problems associated with people working in the joint use space area and so on and so forth have proven unfounded.
You're a little bit over your time. You want to wrap
I'm
up?
finished.
Okay. Let me ask you this. In Maryland, increasingly, the new home communities are common ownership. COCs, HOAs, cooperatives. How would you go, would this bill in its current posture help to move us forward with regard to all of those different kinds of communities? The counties and municipalities aren't basically in charge of street lighting in these entities.
What this legislation does is it gives the community the option to acquire the existing assets from the utility company. In terms of going forward, communities have the ability to install their own street lights without the utility's participation, and the utility simply supplies power to the meter base. And then from that point forward, The city provides it as part of the construction and design.
Okay, but
So-
you got to start when you do something new with where you are. And we've already moved several decades ago away from where the municipalities and counties, in many cases, are controlling this at all. Do you have a plan for what you would do given the now, when so many of the communities are common ownership communities, and I don't see anything in your bill dealing with how you would work in that regard to get us moving from A to B?
I'm not sure I understand your use of the term common ownership.
That most of the communities built in Maryland over about the last 30 years are not under the control directly of a municipality or of a county. They are part of a common ownership entity, a co-op, a homeowner association. So the people that are collecting the dues and controlling what can happen are not the counties or the municipalities in many cases.
So are we talking about, for example, a community where the community pays community fees and the fees pay for the streetlights, and so they're
Yes,
owned and managed by the community?
And that's about
Yes.
80 or
This-
90% of the new
Yeah.
housing built in Maryland over about the last 30 years.
Well, what you have in those cases is the community already has the choice to do what they want. They're not being regulated or controlled by a utility company. The utility companies really in this case, and it's understandable why the utility companies take the position they
Okay.
do. They don't want to have to stock 65 different types of lights and all that sort of thing, so they basically offer one or two choices, and that's all you get.
Okay. Well, all I'm saying is that when we sit down to think how to vote on this bill, people will think about in their local municipalities and counties, what is the status quo now? And it sounds as if the bill is starting from a period of time before there were all of these common ownership communities, but they don't reflect what maybe or 65 or 70% of the housing built in Maryland within the last 30 to 35 years. So,
I'm confused by why you raise this, because if they own the lights, the community already has the choice. This addresses the communities that do not have choice.
okay. Thank you. Senator Kramer.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And yes, thank you. I think I'm going to try to help work through this to clear up the confusion. So, as I understand it, the intention of the bill is that if the utility has ownership of the pole and a local municipality or government seeks to take ownership to modify the pole to their desired effect, the bill enables them to purchase it. If in a community where the homeowners association may own the street lighting in that community, they already have the ability as a homeowners association at their community meeting to say, hey, we're going to put LED lights up there, save the community several thousands of dollars a year in electricity costs, and they don't need the bill because they already have governance over their own light fixtures, should they in fact own them. Is that accurate?
Exactly. That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now have the 3 additional persons signed up. Kathleen Lazzarato, Paul Lepero, and Molly Knoll. If you would come up now. You have 2 minutes each.
I'll let the PSC go first. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Molly Knoll. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Maryland Public Service Commission. We had 3 concerns with the bill, that the fair market value should include or subtract any contributions to costs that were initially made at the time that the lights
Talk
were
right
installed.
into that mic. It's hard with us all having on these masks. Okay.
That the fair market value cost should include anything that had been contributed at the time of construction so that people are not overpaying for the streetlights. The complaint process should go through our existing complaint processes, not to create any administrative inefficiencies, and that the 75-day tariff review was simply too short for us to accomplish. But all 3 of those concerns have been addressed by the amendments, so we're simply available for questions if anyone has any.
All right. Any questions of this witness? All right, we'll go to the next witness, Paul LeParrot.
Closer, okay. There we go. All right, can everyone hear me? All right, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Feldman, members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Katie Lanzarato on behalf of PEPCO and Delmarva Power. With me today is Paul LeParrot. He is our manager of Smart Streetlight Initiatives at PHI. He's come at my request. He's not a registered lobbyist, but he's here to answer any technical questions you may have for our company. You have our written testimony, but I'll add that the genesis of this bill from several years ago was to address a perceived shortcoming of PEPCO not moving expeditiously enough in converting our streetlights to LEDs, and the method by which PEPCO determines fair market value of our streetlight assets. That proved to be a misperception, which is why this legislation, introduced in as many as 10 different sessions dating back more than 10 years, has not advanced. In 2020, PEPCO proposed a plan to roll out a streetlight upgrade program across its Maryland service areas. While the PSC did not approve of this program, it did leave the door open for us to modify the proposal and resubmit it. Taking into account the feedback provided to our company by the PSC, we anticipate refiling a new voluntary conversion program in the near future, and all interested parties will be afforded an opportunity to be heard in that process before the Public Service Commission. I would also like to note that existing law, Section 1-1309 of the Local Governments article, already provides counties and municipalities the right to purchase streetlight equipment from utilities for fair market value. Over the years, PEPCO has worked with interested counties and municipalities on purchasing streetlights, and ultimately they've decided not to pursue purchasing these streetlights, whether it be because of cost or maintenance responsibilities. Therefore, we believe that Senate Bill 376 is unnecessary, and we respectfully request an unfavorable report on the bill.
All right. Senator Jennings.
So I just have a technical question. Maybe you can answer the gentleman that spoke before. They've replaced the lights in my area. They're all purple. It's the street lamps that we used to have, you know, a nice white light. You could see very well. Everything we have now in the area are all LEDs, but they all put off a purple light, a haze. They're not very bright. You can't see much. I'm just curious, is that the standard, or is it just the...
No. If I may, I believe BG&E is in the room. It was a manufacturing defect with some bulbs that BG&E received. There was a bill message recently asking you to report those so that they can replace them.
Got it. Thanks.
All right. Are there other questions? Are there other questions? We don't want conversation between you. If you have a question, let's ask the panelists while they're at the table. All right. Seeing no other questions, then that ends the testimony on this bill. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. We're going next to Senate Bill 423, Senator Hayes. And you've got a, Senator, you need to take the time you need to explain your bill. All witnesses will have 2 minutes each.
Fantastic.
Okay. And if you want your panel up now, Sandy Grace, Don
Come on
White,
up, panel.
and John Friend.
No, go right ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm Antonio Hayes, for the record appearing before the Senate Finance Committee. Senate Bill 423, Natural Gas Strategic Infrastructure Development and Enhancement, Surcharge and Plans, also referred to as the STRIDE Act of 2022, is a technical bill that will alter STRIDE mechanism so that it operates with a multi-year rate plan consistent with how it operates under a traditional base rate case. Coupled with the multi-year plan, this legislation provides gas companies the regulatory framework to accelerate replacement of aging natural gas infrastructure. The bill provides that eligible infrastructure project costs collected under the surcharge be included in base rates as part of the rate adjustments made during the multi-year rate plan, with this surcharge continuing for eligible future projects that are not included in the base rates. Since the Maryland General Assembly enacted the original STRIDE bill in 2013, STRIDE has proven to be an efficient program for replacement of aging gas infrastructure at an accelerated pace to address safety, reliability, and environmental concerns. Under STRIDE, Maryland's gas companies have replaced hundreds of miles of outdated pipes and reduced the time to complete this critical work by decades. But this work can still happen faster. Without this legislation, a gas company under a multi-year plan must reduce its pace to avoid the surcharge cap. This would delay the work underway to timely and efficiency upgrade the gas infrastructure system to ensure continued safety and reliability. So our responsibility as the Maryland legislature and representatives of the citizens of this state to act in their best interest and prioritize safety. This bill simply ensures that modernization of the gas system infrastructure has the ability to advance and improve safety, reliability, regardless of rate-making mechanism. Additionally, STRIDE has resulted in the creation of hundreds of jobs, and there will be others to testify to that, which has positively contributed to the state's economy. Now that utilities are allowed to follow multi-year rate plans, I want to ensure that STRIDE is able to operate with these plans consistent with how it operates under a traditional rate-based case. I ask that you join me in supporting Senate Bill 423 with a favorable committee report.
Are there any questions? Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, I think the timing of this bill is in stark contrast to what's going on downstairs. Right now, EHE is hearing the Climate Solutions Act, which it would have, in effect, ban natural gas in the state of Maryland. This bill wants to remove the caps and allow additional STRIDE costs to be blended into the base rate. So my question, and maybe it's for the panel as they do their presentation, if they could address it, but if we have fewer and fewer natural gas customers, would these infrastructure costs then be spread out over fewer and fewer customers as well, thus increasing the distribution costs almost exponentially as they go forward?
Right, and so, Senator, I'm going to ask that you allow the opportunity for the other panel members to testify, but it has been explained to me, and I understand that even should, right now we're talking about a bill that's just being heard. And as you know, in this legislative process, a bill is just an idea that have to be contemplated and voted on and before it takes action. But even in a case, in a scenario where that legislation was to pass and there was a phase out, it would still take years to effectuate any changes of efficiency in the system. But as the other panel members will testify more specifically to the questions around as it relates to rates.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, are there other questions? All right, then we'll go to you panel members. You have 2 minutes each. Sandy Grace.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and honorable members of the committee. We thank Senator Hayes for his leadership in sponsoring this important piece of legislation. I'm Sandy Grace, Vice President of Governmental and External Affairs for BGE in support of Senate Bill 423. In 2013, STRIDE was enacted largely due to this committee's effort and leadership to accelerate modernization of the natural gas delivery system to prioritize safety and reliability. The result of this important legislative effort, thank you, is a program that has proven critically successful in this regard. The program has and continues to confer both economic and environmental benefits. With respect to economic benefits, currently Stride supports over 600 full-time career jobs, including BGE employees and contractors. These investments are estimated to generate $2.5 billion of incremental impact on Maryland's economy, while supporting more than 14,700 jobs. Accelerating Stride will create additional demand for a skilled workforce and greater job growth in Maryland. If BGE's Stride program were to be accelerated at a pace of approximately 5 years, we project that those investments would generate about additional $400 million in additional economic impact. With respect to environmental benefits, our Stride work reduces greenhouse gas emissions. In aggregate, the current approved Stride plan is expected to reduce 2.1 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. For perspective, this is equivalent to 464,000 passenger vehicles driven in 1 year. These greenhouse gas emissions reductions occur sooner as the Stride work accelerates. If approved, this legislation would allow BGE to accelerate our Stride work and realize the benefits at a faster pace. You have a written testimony and a fact sheet detailing these benefits, and I would like to turn this over to my colleagues, Vice President of Gas Delivery, Don White, and John Frayne, Director of Regulatory Policy, who I've requested appear today to present testimony on the value of the Stride program. And with that, I would urge the committee to issue a favorable report.
All right, and you have 2 minutes each.
Okay, thank you. And good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. As Sandy mentioned, I'm Don White, and I'm responsible for BGE's gas business. Stride allows BGE to accelerate the replacement of aging gas infrastructure to provide Maryland businesses and citizens with safe, reliable, modern, and environmentally sound gas infrastructure, all while boosting Maryland's economy. Prior to implementing Stride in 2014, BGE estimated nearly a century to replace all aging cast iron main and bare steel main. At our current pace, BGE anticipates completing Stride pipeline replacement at an accelerated pace. Since the Commission approved BGE's initial Stride plan in 2014, BGE invested more than $1 billion in gas system infrastructure replacement and has retired approximately 300 miles of aging cast iron or bare steel gas pipeline and replaced over 70,000 gas service lines. As part of these replacement projects, we are also upgrading the system and adding additional safety equipment as a part of our overall modernization, which works to enhance the gas system safety and reliability. While Stride is working for the Maryland natural gas customer, it can work even better, it can work even faster. BGE has less than 1,000 miles of gas main left to replace, and the company is reviewing scenarios to accelerate our work. This acceleration would reduce the duration of BGE's original 30-year plan by as much as 25%. Ultimately, any acceleration would still require the approval of the Commission, even with the approval of this bill. However, we cannot accelerate to these higher levels and maintain the financial integrity of the company without the updates proposed to the Stride mechanism in this legislation. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to John Frayne.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is John Frayne, and I am here on behalf of BGE in support of Senate Bill 423. This bill is a technical fix to align two rate-making mechanisms, the Stride surcharge and a multi-year rate plan. In fact, when BGE's pilot multi-year rate plan was approved by the Maryland Public Service Commission in 2020, the Maryland PSC told BGE in its order to come to the General Assembly to make this technical fix. Senator Hayes' bill simply aligns the Stride surcharge and multi-year plans so that Stride investments are treated the same as all other utility investments. If this bill is passed, Stride investments would still begin recovery in the Stride surcharge, but then in each year of a multi-year rate plan, they would be moved from the surcharge and reflected in the forecasted distribution rates, just like all other utility investments. a prudency review would still be conducted by the Commission and with all stakeholders at the conclusion of the multi-year plan, the same as all other utility investments. When the STRIDE legislation was originally passed in 2013, the only rate case option available to Maryland utilities was a traditional historical rate case. However, what was not contemplated in 2013 was how a STRIDE surcharge would coexist with a multi-year rate plan. Now, in 2021, the Maryland PSC has begun modernizing Maryland rate making, and BGE is the first utility in Maryland to pilot a multi-year rate plan. Among other things, STRIDE provides for a surcharge to begin recovering investments at the same time as those investments are being made. Cost recovery stays in the surcharge, subject to the cap, until the utility's next rate case. Waiting until a rate case to move recovery of STRIDE investments into distribution rates ensured that the prudency review of historical STRIDE investments happened at the same time as other historical investments in a traditional rate case. That has now changed with the multi-year rate plan. Now there are forecasted investments in utility rates, and STRIDE now needs to change in order to align with that multi-year rate plan mechanism. In summary, this bill would simply ensure that the PSC is able to place the safety investments, important safety investments that BGE and other gas utilities make under STRIDE on the same level playing field for cost recovery purposes as all other distribution investments approved in a multi-year plan. Thank you, and I urge a favorable report on this bill.
Okay. Before you leave, I'd like you to know that we have unfavorable testimony from Office of People's Counsel, the Apartment and Office Building Association, Maryland PIRG, National Consumer Law Center, the Sierra Club. Okay. Well, I just want to just ask you, and several more entities, what would you say to us to overcome, and I'm sure you're aware of where your opposition is coming from.
Right. I'm not sure the question was for, Madam Chair, but the organizations that are in opposition today were in opposition in 2013. They were in opposition with the pilot, and so their opposition is pretty much consistent, with their past history of opposing these changes, even though the legislature has chosen to go forward on many occasions. And like my grandmother used to say, a broken clock is always right twice a day. So I think we have the responsibility to sort through the testimony that's before us today and make a decision based off of what's before us.
Okay, Senator Hershey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd still like to go back to the question that I had mentioned earlier, and Senator's right. While we can't predict what legislation will pass and in what form, let's just say that something does move, and let's just say that maybe those that have the means see the writing on the wall, and maybe they transition to all electric immediately, again, leaving less gas customers. By nature of this bill, it removes the caps and allows more infrastructure projects to be built into the base rate. And the base rate is still volumetric, right? So it's still dependent on users and spread out over the users. So doesn't less users equal greater rates?
Thank you, Senator Hershey. Let me take that question. In the first instance, I want to express that there are near-term benefits today to investing in the STRIDE program. There are reliability benefits, there are safety benefits, and importantly, there are greenhouse gas emissions benefits which align with the state's decarbonization goals. On a longer-term basis, the reason to invest in this system is because the pathway to decarbonization should not be one that's done in a vacuum, and it should take into account multiple different pathways and potential options whereby the existing delivery system could be utilized to encourage and allow for the development of new technologies such as hydrogen or renewable natural gas over the long term. And so what I would say is the reason to invest in the system today is both a near-term benefit as well as a long-term benefit in terms of preserving choice and optionality for Marylanders to achieve a decarbonized future.
Right, and I do understand that, but at the same time, I think if the General Assembly passes what it's looking at, it sends a message to move away from natural gas. And therefore, those that can are going to move to electric. So my question still remains, if there are fewer natural gas customers or fewer gas customers, doesn't the effects of this bill get then spread out over fewer customers? They're not, if you're off of gas, if you decide to go away from gas, you're no longer a customer. So the cost increases associated with this bill would then be spread out over fewer customers regardless of the benefits.
I would say that the benefits are for the benefit of all Marylanders, and the investments that are made for the benefit of safety and for reliability and for environmental reasons, as well as the economic benefit, our economic benefits benefit all Marylanders. And regardless of the actual number of customers, that is the denominator that you reference, I think it's still really critical to ensure that the system is safe and it's reliable and confers all of those benefits which are realized by all Marylanders.
Right, but not all Marylanders will pay for this.
Not all Marylanders, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, only gas customers will pay for them.
Only gas customers, and again, if we look at legislation, only those that haven't moved to electric yet. Those gas customers remaining, that smaller and smaller group of customers, will be paying a larger and larger amount of this infrastructure.
And Senator Hershey, if I may,
Sure.
I think the question that you're posing is honestly a question that would be facing us, regardless of whether this bill passes. I think, what I would say is that clearly this bill has safety and reliability and greenhouse gas emission benefits as well as economic benefits that we're saying, would be good to achieve. Ultimately, this bill is really just a technical fix between two rate-making mechanisms, and it doesn't preclude any, further action on decarbonization or, what might happen in a decarbonized future where, costs for the gas system might need to be dealt with.
Okay. Well, again, to be sure, I'm not a proponent of banning natural gas. However, I see the writing on the wall and what is coming down the pike from the General Assembly here, and I see as a result of doing that, we are going to see fewer and fewer natural gas customers. And I am concerned that legislation like this, as well-intentioned as it is going to then be spread out over fewer and fewer people. And thus, those that are stuck having to use natural gas, that those that cannot afford to go to all electric are going to be paying the cost, as you said, for all of Marylanders.
And I think we understand that. We also believe that the gas system has, a lot of opportunities in the future. Natural gas is one, renewable natural gas is another, new technologies such as hydrogen. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion necessarily that the natural gas system wouldn't be of use in the future.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there other questions of this panel? All right, David. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go next to Tammy Bresnahan, David Lapp, and Ryan Washington. You have 2 minutes each.
Do you want to start, David, or do you want me?
I'll start. That's fine. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly and members of the Senate Finance Committee. David Lapp, People's Counsel. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. Our office opposes SB 423 because it is contrary to the short and long-term interests of utility customers. As you've heard, STRIDE is a law that accelerates utility natural gas infrastructure spending. It's a carefully constructed statute. The statute is not primarily about safety, it's about accelerating natural gas investments. And this is not a technical fix. This bill would make accelerating natural gas investments even easier, in particular by reducing the role of customer safeguards in the current STRIDE law. specifically the $2 per month cap on the monthly surcharge for residential customers. The bill would let utilities with STRIDE programs and with multi-year plans to automatically move all STRIDE investment from the STRIDE surcharge to base rates every year. This harms consumers in at least 3 ways. The first way is that it undermines the $2 surcharge. This surcharge is an important consumer protection that serves to control the rate of acceleration of this spending. Short-term, SB 423 will effectively raise the monthly residential surcharge cap from $2 to $6 over the course of 3 years of a multi-year plan. And you don't have to take our word for it. Read the PSC's fiscal note, which says, quote, that the bill, quote, will likely impact customer bills by an undetermined amount, end quote. Long-term, SB 423 increased the risk of stranded costs that utilities will ultimately try to recover from ratepayers or from taxpayers. Second, the bill effectively eliminates the transparency that the current law provides for STRIDE investments through the surcharge. That surcharge must show up on customer bills. The surcharge will show the current year's projected spending, but it will not include previous years' spending. Those costs will be buried in base rates. The third problem is that the bill would result in STRIDE program costs being moved into base rates without a prudency review. Prudence review is the way that customers are protected from poor utility decision-making. This bill would make prudence review much more difficult because those costs will already be rolled into base rates. Customers will therefore be exposed to greater risks from poor utility decision-making. Just to address Senator Hershey's question very briefly, I would just say that you're reading the writing on the wall correctly. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to revisit that comment about the stranded costs. And I realize that came from the PSC, but does that relate to the line of questioning from Senator Hershey with accelerated infrastructure for gas and then perhaps moving away from use of gas as we start greening our energy sources, that now we'll have this accelerated infrastructure that will eventually become perhaps abandoned, and it's those investment costs that become stranded? Can you kind of give me a little bit of insight into that?
Absolutely. And to clarify, that was the PSC just said there was an undetermined bill impact. The stranded cost reference was my own.
Okay. Then in that case, you can maybe give me some insight.
Yes, that is it. These gas investments are paid off. They're depreciated over time. And some of them aren't paid off for 30, 40, 50, even 60 years. Right. Under BGE's current STRIDE plan on file with the Commission, those costs are recovered as late as the year 2099. This is long after most methods by which we achieve our goals of decarbonization. We will be long past natural gas. And at some point, the cost as a result of the sequence of events that Senator Hershey was referring to, customers leaving the gas system to electrify, those volumetric charges will be paid for by fewer and fewer customers. Some people call this the death spiral.
Or until they're eventually abandoned altogether.
Or until they're abandoned altogether, at which point in time, if it comes before 2099, those costs will be stranded. And many people believe that it'll be long before 2099. Okay. And most of we're only in year 6 of STRIDE. I'm pretty certain it's very early in STRIDE, and As you heard from BGE, their plans are for 30 years. So most of these investments haven't been made. So there's a high possibility of a significant amount of stranded costs.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Tammy Bresnahan. I am the Director of Advocacy for ARP Maryland. It is nice to be back. It's nice to see all of you. You know, I'm not the technical person. I came here to ARP in 2011, and 2012 was our first stride. And I knew much about utility rate making as I do today. But I will tell you, for 26 years, I worked in local departments of social services, and I watched when people couldn't pay their bills. I watched babies and families go without heat, and I know one thing, they can't live without heat. It is a necessity today. And I think BGE really appreciates, and Pepco appreciates, that there is a consumer voice in the room. I know that they love it that we come in, and I know they appreciate when we come and we hire attorneys like we did when the Public Service Commission was deciding whether or not to decide on alternative rate making because the legislature did not pass that legislation. And what they decided was that they would create a pilot for multi-year plans. And so we were hoping that it would be a pilot, that we would see what it would do. Would it be more beneficial to the consumer? And so what we're asking you today is to take a good look at this legislation. We want to make sure that it won't adversely increase people's heating bills, especially in this time. And just one other comment. I think the utility always says modernizing rate making. As a consumer protection advocate, the protection of the consumer is in the current rate making, and that we see that that is beneficial to the consumer. So we ask you to really look at this. We are asking you for an unfavorable report, but you know that we know that you'll do the right thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Senator Hayes.
My question was actually for the previous panelists, but
Go ahead.
I could wait till they finish.
No,
or
go
you want-
ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I think, was it David, I think it was?
Yeah.
That testified for. David, you had said, has the surcharge, although there's a cap, have we ever reached the cap yet?
Yes, when the utility files for a base rate case, those.
So we've reached a maximum cap already with, since this?
No, it's replenished essentially. The surcharge, every time a utility has a base rate
Right,
case.
but in any given year, I guess my question is, have we maxed out the cap?
I believe at least one utility, maybe Columbia Gas. I'd have to check on that to be certain, but I believe only one utility has consistently hit up against the cap.
Right, so with the exception of that one utility, there's been years where we have not reached the cap, right?
My understanding, yes, is that there are some utilities that have not reached the cap. Yes.
Right. So when the fiscal analysts note that it could be an undetermined bill impact unknown, as you testified to, could they be referring to because it fluctuates from year to year, that they can't determine the exact amount? Could we also interpret it that way as opposed to what you testified here today?
I mean, I think the fiscal note was about the impact of this bill.
Right.
I mean, if they were talking about stride generally, I think that would be correct. But it would be capped by the surcharge. They could not exceed that surcharge. Under this bill, that surcharge would essentially be wiped out each year. The cost wouldn't be, but the surcharge would be. So there would be an annual process by which the surcharge is returned to zero, while those costs still are recovered through customers in base rates.
So tell me how is that different from how we calculate the base rate plan now?
Well,
it's the same, right?
I'm not sure I understand the
Right,
question.
so the base rate is determined on an annual basis already, right?
Well, in a multi-year plan, the base rates change each year, but under traditional rate making,
It's every year.
No, it's not every year. It's when the utility comes in for a rate case. So
And how often?
in some cases, that might be 5 years. In some cases, it could be more frequent than that. So it depends on the utility. And in a base rate of case, of course, a utility's overall rates are reviewed. They don't come in just to clean up the stride surcharge. If they're earning an excess return on equity, for example, that would be reviewed in the rate case. So there's a fuller picture, and any costs that are any rate base increase is subject to prudence review in a normal rate case. This would, under this bill, that would not happen for surcharge costs, and it would not be subject to an overall review of the utility's rates, including, for example, its return on equity.
Can you talk a little, because you did mention that this would wipe out the prudence review. And so how do you interpret that, and where could we, like, is there a certain part of the bill that you've identified that, or is it because of the multi-year plan you're saying that review would be eliminated?
The bill would move costs from the surcharge into base rates without a prudence review. That doesn't happen in utility rate making. Costs are not moved into the utility base rates without a prudence review. It theoretically could still happen after that. Theoretically. It's a lot more difficult. We have our current commission has expressed reservations about its ability to review prudence generally after the fact. This would make that even harder because the cost would already be rolled in the rate base, and then there would have to be, if a finding of imprudence were made, there would have to be, in essence, a look back to pull those costs back or a credit. It makes it quite a bit more challenging. That's why before, under traditional rate making, before costs are moved into rates, they are subject to prudence review.
Right. And lastly, as I testified already, has there been any point in the evolution of STRIDE or whatever where you guys have come in support of these modernization changes?
These STRIDE, there are annual project lists. There's 5-year plans.
No, I'm just talking about like in making changes here. So the whole idea from STRIDE is paying for infrastructure that's taking place, right? Would you agree to that?
It's for replacing existing infrastructure, yes.
Right. And so it gives the ability for the utilities to pay for things that took place, but for whatever reason, if the infrastructure cost is lower than what was abstracted, there's a process by which the PSC, the regulator, returns it back to the ratepayers. Is that, am I understanding that right?
I'm not quite sure I'm understanding the question. I mean, I think you started out, to be clear, our office doesn't always oppose like the yearly project list that utilities put forward for STRIDE. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, depending on our assessment of them.
I'm sorry, I moved on from that question. You're still trying to answer the first one.
Yeah.
I get that. The idea is to pay for aging infrastructure, right? That's what the STRIDE bill is all about, right? If, for whatever reason, the money or funds or whatever, for lack of a better word, is generated and it doesn't meet the cost of what the infrastructure actually was, is there any refund back to the persons that's paying for this rate?
Yes, under current law, when the utility is in a rate case, and at that point in time, they're going to move the STRIDE cost in the rate base, and at that point, before it's moved in the rate case, the commission can review those costs for prudence and deny putting those costs into rate base.
Right, but what you're saying is with the multi-year, they won't be able to review it for proof. Oh, they may be able to review it after the fact, and that's the issue that you're coming with.
Yes, that's correct. It would be an after-the-fact review.
Gotcha. But it won't go away.
It will certainly make it much more challenging.
Gotcha. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ryan Washington.
Actually, I'm Kevin Carey with the Apartment Office Building Association. I should have been on the list instead of Ryan. I know Ryan. I'm definitely not Ryan Washington.
Well, we had Ryan. Are you representing Ryan?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and the committee. I'm Kevin Carey with the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. AOBA members manage or own approximately 60 million square feet of commercial office space and close to 300,000 apartment units in the state of Maryland. And they do receive their natural gas service from Washington Gas Light Company and Baltimore Gas and Electric. For more than 45 years, AOBA has actively participated in Public Service Commission hearings under rate cases, as well as actively participated in the STRIDE proceedings and multi-year rate plans. Again, you've heard a lot of our concerns are similar to Office of People's Counsel. Is the cap under current law? Obviously, there's protections for ratepayers. The $2 surcharge cap per month that we see on the residential side also impacts our commercial customers because these monthly charges are based on the proportions of total distribution revenue. So if that cap's moved up, commercial ratepayers will also pay that. So that's why we are here in concern. The purpose of the cap is to ensure that ratepayers are not overwhelmed by the cost of utility services provided by Baltimore Gas and Electric and Washington Gas while they replace aging pipeline and timely recovers the need for replacing this infrastructure. So AOBA opposes SB 423 based on, because it adversely impacts all Maryland natural gas ratepayers by increasing the cost of replacing this aging infrastructure and eliminating the transparency and authorizing gas utilities to transfer these cost recoveries from the surcharge into utility base rates, as we've heard. And again, it's resetting that cap to zero each year under these multi-year rate plans that concerns us. When the costs are removed from the surcharge and placed in the base rate, when it gets reduced, it's unlikely that the company will hit that surcharge anytime during a multi-year rate plan. So in the way we see it, if SB 423 becomes law, natural gas rates for all customers will rise. So in closing, AOBA submits that SB 423 will simply exacerbate the concerns raised and addressed in the PSC's December 2020 Order 89678, as the PSC acknowledged any utility company, including a natural gas utility company, that seeks approval of a multi-year rate plan must accept the benefits and limitations of such plans. And gets to the case of, because it's a multi-year rate plan, BGE can't go back to the 3-year, can't go back to update their STRIDE costs. So AOBA requests an unfavorable report on SB 423.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions of this witness? Thank you to all of the witnesses. We're going next to Senate Bill 464, Senator Feldman, Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Enforcement. And Senator, your key witnesses are Bruce Variano and James Barron, if you'd like them to.
Madam Chair, I think that the podium needs to get broken in at least for the first time this session. So I'm going to stand up here from my old lawyer days. So I do have two panelists. Maybe I could just bring them up now. I think Mr. Variano, Mr. Barron from the authority. Members of the committee, so I've got several bills here. Some are a little more complicated than others. This one, I think, is very straightforward, very simple. No opposition. But way of some background, Senate Bill 464, 2010, we established something called the Maryland Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Authority to protect underground facilities in our state, such as natural gas, telephone, cable, television, water, and sewer lines. And the authority that we created back in 2010 hears complaints and can assess civil penalties for violation of the laws protecting our underground facilities. The authority is largely funded through fees paid by owner members, such as state and local governments and utilities. And there was a sense amongst many of the major stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, Washington Gas, BGE, Pepco, Columbia Gas, utilities, Comcast, et cetera, as well as organizations representing commercial developers, home builders, MML, et cetera, that a major rewrite of that 2010 law was in order. And there was a steering committee a few years ago convened by the authority. They met 29 times, and they came up with a set of recommendations. So this committee in 2020 passed Senate Bill 877, made a variety of changes to the authority, its composition, its powers, and the processes for the ongoing protection of the underground facilities. Among other things, it specified the fees the authority could collect, it clarified the authority's process for handling complaints, and it modified the authority's process for calculating penalties. That bill passed unanimously out of this committee, unanimously out of the full Senate. And that brings me to Senate Bill 464 today, and I want to thank Senator Hershey for being the number 2 on this bill, so it's bipartisan, being introduced solely as a simple housekeeping measure to correct a clerical error unintentionally made in the 2020 bill when original language from the original bill was accidentally removed when we did the 2020 bill. Specifically, the provision we're talking about gives the authority the remedy, the option of instead of just imposing a civil penalty for the violation of the mark before you dig provisions, which is in the current law, it also, in addition, gave the authority the authority to find a to require the violator to participate in damage prevention, training, or implement procedures to mitigate the likelihood of damage to underground facilities. That part, that extra additional authority, that extra option was accidentally removed in 2020 when we did the rewrite. It was in the original 2010 law. So this bill, that's all this bill is doing, is putting that back in. It wasn't supposed to be removed. Bill's an emergency bill so that these original provisions of the law can be put back in as soon as possible, particularly since the authority is currently reviewing and deciding as we sit here on alleged violations. So, Madam Chair, that's what the bill does. With that, I'd ask for a favorable on Senate Bill 464, and I do have my 2 panelists, I believe, Mr. Bariano, Mr. Barron from the authority, who could testify and answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Mr. Bariano?
I just want to savor the moment. It's been 2 years, and it's phenomenal to be here. Phenomenal to be here. I would like to thank the Vice Chairman and Senator Hershey for introducing this bill. Very respectfully, Madam Chair, I would urge that would you kindly put it on a voting list as soon as possible because, sincerely, because this is a very important piece of the current law that the authority can't use as it's handling cases, as you'll hear from Mr. Barron, and there should be this alternative, and it was just a mistake, no one's fault, things happen, and the sooner we get it back on the books, they can utilize it for the benefit of all the parties considered. And I say that very respectfully. I know you have a lot to do. And I'll just say finally, this authority, this whole system, is the baby of this committee and the ECM committee. You all did it, those of you that have been here for a while. It is something concrete, tangible, that's been a huge success in Maryland, thanks to the Senate Finance Committee and the House Economic Matters Committee. And would ask a favorable report, and thank you very much. And it's just wonderful to be here.
Thank you. We're glad to see you, too. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Jim Barron. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Authority, which, as you know, is the enforcement agency for Title 12, commonly known as the Miss Utility Law. We're encouraging a favorable report today. The authority always, almost in all their cases, require damage prevention training in lieu of or in addition to fines. In fact, we generally always recommend a 50% reduction in the fine for completion of the damage prevention training. We believe that the training is more important, particularly for first-time offenders, as to start handing out large fines. So we're encouraging a favorable report today. Thank you for the opportunity. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
All right, Senator Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great bill, have really not related to the bill as much as it is misutilities. So I know we're contemplating this big climate change bill, and I know that there's a process when you're planting trees or whatever where you have to get misutilities. Does every local jurisdiction determine, or I don't know if you know the question, each jurisdiction determine their own rate for misutility services?
Each jurisdiction, if I understand your question, each jurisdiction must, if they own underground facilities, they have to be a member of misutility. And when a ticket is initiated, they are immediately notified that a planned excavation or demolition is going to be in the area, and they're required at that point to mark and identify where those utilities are so they're not damaged.
Right, but who's usually paying for the service of finding out where those utilities are?
The service is paid for by the facility owners. This is a free call. Nobody has to pay for it. However, there is a provision in the statute that allows a municipality or a government agency like a county to charge for the marking. There's very few that do.
Right. I thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence. Not related to this bill, great bill. But as we anticipate the climate control bill, there's over 5 million trees that's going to be installed. I think the average tree is somewhere around $60-something. From my understanding, some utilities are charging as high as $27 to $30, and that might be something that we might want to consider, and what burden it may be on those folks that want to plant trees in that whole area. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that ends the testimony on that bill. Oh, Tiffany Harvey.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I will be very, very brief before you. I think you already have the background on Senate Bill 464 and why it's important. For the record, I am Tiffany Harvey, for Vice President for Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast in Maryland and in Delaware. It's great to see everyone today. We are in support of this bill. We would urge the committee to have a favorable report, and I would only add one thing to the testimony that you've already heard, which is there have been millions of federal dollars that have flowed into Maryland over the course of the last year for broadband connectivity. What that means that there is going to be more trenching in the state, and with more trenching, there's more likelihood for damage to underground facilities. So for that reason, we would ask you all to consider this bill and encourage a favorable report so that we can ensure that we are doing responsible trenching in the state of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, that is the testimony on that good bill. And we're going next to Senator Feldman again for Senate Bill 418, Energy Generation, Transmission, and Storage Projects, blah, 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 blah. And if your key witnesses want to come up to the table, William Kress and Jeffrey Guado, you will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This one a little more involved than the last one. So Senate Bill 418 is designed to put into place measures to ensure Maryland's energy generation projects create quality family-supporting jobs for Marylanders and promote, at the same time, contracting opportunities for Maryland's local, small, minority-owned, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses. At the outset, let me say that there are some ongoing discussions we're still having with the Public Service Commission and other stakeholders. And there are some amendments to the bill I can mention that I suspect there will be some others. I think the amendments that I will mention will take care of some of the utilities concerns that are raised in the testimony. But I think there is going to be likely some additional amendments that we try to get the bill in a posture to meet the goals I just outlined earlier. But let me just broadly speaking, number one, this bill only applies to energy generation projects that are 2 megawatts or greater that need a certificate of public convenience and necessity from the Maryland Public Service Commission. We're talking the big projects. One amendment I can discuss right off the bat provides that the bill does not include offshore wind or energy storage. And the inclusion of the energy storage provision was, I believe, the main reason the utilities were originally opposed. So with that amendment, which I'm going to be proffering to the committee, I believe they may be okay with the bill now. It requires the developers of these projects to take all reasonable actions. It doesn't require all reasonable actions to execute community benefit agreements with organizations representing the surrounding communities. These agreements will address or designed to address opportunities for local, small, minority, women-owned, and veteran-owned businesses, career training for local residents, veterans, women, and minorities, project safety requirements, requires the payment of prevailing wages to the construction workforce, and the use of responsible contractors. I would note, Madam Chair, that when we passed the offshore wind bill back in 2013, we had these very same provisions requiring community benefit agreements. Outside of energy, for those from Prince George's, the MGM National Harbor project included a requirement that the developers engage in and enter into community benefit agreements. The Port Covington project, so this is not unprecedented. Several other states have done it. The bottom line is, at least on these provisions, it's to allow the community and energy developer to come to an agreement on a project that serves the interests of both the community and the developer, just as it's worked with some of the other projects I just mentioned. It's a win-win for everyone. And as I said, it talks about reasonable actions, no requirement. Next, exempting covered energy projects with project labor agreements from reporting the requirements of the bill. So it exempts those types of projects. Beyond those points, Madam Chair, whether you like it or not, the bottom line is that Maryland and the nation's in the middle of a shift to transition to renewable energy. Large amounts of money are beginning to flow from the federal government to the states in the clean energy space. We aren't going backward. At the same time, from a policy standpoint, it's really important to ensure that Maryland's shift to renewable energy is a transition that provides good-paying jobs for all Marylanders. So it makes sense for the state to establish community and workforce standards for energy generation projects, just like we did do back in 2013 for the offshore wind projects. It increases the likelihood of the jobs being created locally. It mitigates the shifting of health coverage and other costs to taxpayers, provides for a higher supply of apprenticeship programs, which in turn leads to higher wages and economic opportunities for less educated workers, and trains the next generation of skilled workers in Maryland, including women, minorities, veterans. And also it has the effect of injecting economic stimulus effect into the local economies, local workers, more local income tax, et cetera. Now, specifically, what exactly is in 4108? So, number one, Maryland would be joining other states like Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, and New York that have already passed laws to establish labor standards like these for energy projects. In fact, if you remember, just last year when we passed the bill dealing with geothermal, we put some standards just like this in play. It extends the state's prevailing wage to energy generation. It aligns it with the General Assembly's goal to create quality infrastructure jobs. There is economic analysis that's been submitted to the committee, which shows that labor costs actually only represent 5% of the total cost of energy development projects. Those costs are capitalized over the useful life of the project, so the legislation will have actually no impact at the end of the day on retail energy rates. Those studies back that point up. The bill has various certifications of compliance requirements for the contractors and subcontractors, including certifying that they will or have properly classified the workers. In other words, not classifying them as independent contractors when in fact they should be classified as employees. Finally, as I said earlier, after discussions with the PSC and others, I'm offering an amendment that, number one, will remove energy storage projects as they do not require CPCN, apply the requirements of all the energy projects to 2 megawatts or over, not all projects 2 megawatts or over, not just Tier 1 and nuclear, requires the standards to be included in the PSC order as opposed to requiring the PSC to make an after-the-fact evidentiary finding the developer has complied, so this is on the front end. As for opposition, Madam Chair, as I think I said earlier, the utilities, I think, were concerned primarily with the inclusion of energy storage, and I think even in the title it has the word transmission. We're taking care of that with the amendments. I'll continue to talk to the PSC with their concerns. The Department of Labor, if you look at the fiscal note, I think it's in there, they seem to object to the fact that they may have to hire one assistant attorney general and don't have the money to do that. If you look at the fiscal note, that puts it at $78,000. Apparently, the Department of Labor is opposed because they cannot come up with $78,000 for one new assistant attorney general. I'll continue to work with them on that. Department of Natural Resources, I did speak to Secretary Hadaway Riccio. She has some concerns about the PPRP project, which is involved with compliance. And I think if you see in page 5 of the fiscal note, there is a quantification of about $100,000 in terms of some additional compliance for her entity, and particularly the PPRP project, which is under DNR. I'll continue to talk to Secretary Hadaway Riccio on that. That's basically opposition testimony. That's basically what we're trying to achieve in Senate Bill 418. I'll take questions, or I'll certainly let the panel weigh in as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd ask for a favorable on Senate Bill 418.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any bells on, so I think you did a good job. All right, let's hear from your panelist, William Kress.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bill Kress here today on behalf of LIUNA in support of the bill, and I want to thank the sponsor, the Vice Chair. He's done an excellent job describing the bill, as always. So this bill essentially gives you, as legislators, an opportunity to serve your residents when you have an energy development project in your district. This bill says to the energy developer, you have to meet with the local groups. You have to try to the best of your ability, come up with a community benefit agreement, and that's to provide something in return for placing that development in your district. Nothing uncommon about this. It's very commonplace throughout the U.S. I think the Senator mentioned there are 11 states that currently hold these provisions. Certainly, it's building upon the foundation that was laid for the offshore wind bill. Those requirements were also in that bill. And so we think this is a natural progression for Maryland policy. There is going to be a lot more of energy development in the state as you try to get to net zero over the coming years. Let me briefly talk about the cost. I think Senator Feldman mentioned that the cost of a project typically is between 5 and 10% when it comes to labor. Our study, through a 25-page economic analysis that's been submitted, shows that worst-case scenario, a 30% increase over what would have been paid by the contractors versus prevailing wage results in a 2 to 3% increase. That's worst-case scenario. You capitalize that over 20 years, the effects on rates are de minimis. Finally, let me say with respect to the amendments, we've worked with the sponsor and the other stakeholders, and I think we've gotten to a place where we've gotten rid of all of the objections. I know that the Public Service Commission is much more comfortable with what we have. The utilities are in that position as well. I can't speak for them, but we shared amendments today, and I think they have taken care of those issues. And I think the new process with the amendments will also go a long way in satisfying the concerns of DNR. So with that, we look forward to working with the committee, and in whatever context you want to move this forward. If there's a work group or if you'd like more information, we're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, so we'll go next to Jeffrey Guido.
Thank you, Madam.
D.C. Building Trades Council.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. The Baltimore D.C. Metro Trades Building Trades Council supports Senate Bill 418. Currently the solar and wind industries do not pay compensations similar to what our members achieve through nuclear, coal, fossil fuels, natural gas. As Maryland's intent on moving away from that type of energy and more into renewables, we need to have the labor standards in place that will promote those wages and benefits. All of our building trades apprenticeship schools teach green energy construction, and they have for years. So we have a readily certified, trained, skilled workforce to install these projects. They won't have to be looking forward or trying to train people to take over. We have a few standards that we'd like to have implemented as far as the prevailing wage, benefits, compliance, reporting compliances, participation in apprenticeship programs registered with the state of Maryland. Contractors that have been compliant with these federal, state, and wage hour laws in the previous 3 years, establishment of a plan for outreach. And this is really important because you have returning citizens, single parents, people emancipated from the foster care program, and these jobs should have an avenue or venue for them to get into these middle-class paying jobs and turn their lives around. And the aspirational goal of 25% or more for these hours worked, and protecting these laws and will help standards for Maryland's working men and women, and we ask for a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Reedy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, and maybe either one of you can answer. Bill, I'll ask you. At this time where solar, wind is something it is an attempt to grow, it's a beginning market. It's still very in the early stages, and pricing-wise, very non-competitive with more traditional sources of energy. Is it wise for us to be adding additional cost at this point, or are there some concerns that we could make it even less competitive with other sources of energy that the state seems to be wanting to move away from?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think actually it's the case now that most of the projects that pencil out that are economical are actually renewable projects. And when this bill was originally drafted, it focused on renewable and the possibility of nuclear, because the fossil fuel industry right now, those projects aren't economical. They're above market cost. So we see a trend moving forward that's going to be almost all renewable. There may be new technologies coming on board, and we're going to be moving in that direction, I think, regardless. I looked at some numbers before we came in. There was 28,000 megawatts of renewables last year. We need to double that yearly up until 2035 to get somewhere close to net zero. So you're going to see more and more generation. The cost is going to come down. Over the last 10 years, it's come down dramatically in solar. Wind is coming down in cost, and you're going to see new technologies.
So not to interrupt you, and I apologize, but just so if it's that's big of a challenge and we need to grow our renewables, including the kind of renewables that are truly renewable, that aren't like burning things and stuff like that, what are we? Wouldn't it make more sense to keep cost lower for a time? I mean, that's I guess my question. With anything we add in, doesn't it make more sense to keep cost as low as possible? For a time. I mean,
yeah, I appreciate that. Look, the numbers that we ran, we see a potential of up to 3% increase. In the total cost of the project, you capitalize that over 20 years. What you get in return for that is something for your citizens in your communities to say, here's a benefit. We're taking 300 acres of farmland to do large-scale solar, and in return, we're going to hire local people, we're going to pay you a decent wage, we're going to have other things for the community. It's a trade-off. It's a policy decision. Is there a small impact? There is, but we don't think it's significant.
Thank you. I just think it, offering some incentivizing a little bit more for folks to invest in. But I understand your point. Thank you for your answers.
Okay, Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kresh, you had mentioned that we would see more and more generation-type projects. I think the sponsor said with the amendments, this would only include projects over 2 megawatts. I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the reality of this is just aimed at utility-scale solar projects then. Is that accurate?
With respect to this bill and what's in the queue right now, there are 5 projects that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. 4 of them are on the Eastern Shore. They're all utility-scale solar.
Right.
But there may be other projects that are coming along. I'm not aware of what's being contemplated.
So we don't see a queue full of land-based wind projects in Maryland?
Not yet, no.
Not yet. So as far as other generation projects, and I can see this is the concern of Mr. Guido, is that we're not looking at natural gas projects anymore. Again, if we see a ban on that, not looking at fuel and oil projects anymore, not looking at coal projects anymore. Your workers are having less and less to do as we move towards a greener solutions, that we need to find something, as you said, for them to do. Is utility scale project the answer to filling all of those jobs as we move towards these different types of policies?
I wouldn't say fulfill all of them.
Right.
But there's a lot that goes not just with the development of, say, a solar farm or a wind farm.
Right.
That has to tie into the grid, and that PJM grid has to be able to handle the additional use of the electricity that's going to be required to run these electrified buildings, charge your buses, trains, cars.
Mm-hmm.
And my perspective, I think you need a third reactor at Calvert Cliffs to meet those needs. That's all part of it. Is no one solution to everything that we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's a carbonless future, but a less carbon future is what we probably will achieve, more practicality and reality. But there's no reason for working men and women in Maryland to take it on the chin and have to take less wages or, lesser work conditions to install these facilities.
I'm in agreement with you about Calvert Cliffs for sure. But I do see this move to electrify everything certainly helps the electricians that you represent, but all of the other trades, I think, are going to potentially suffer as a result of some of these other projects not being there, and it maybe even more importantly, these projects shutting down, and then we end up losing maintenance-type jobs as well, too, which are very critical to the trades that you represent. So
I think you'll get some disagreement on where the jurisdiction lines fall in all of this work, but
Right.
I'm not going to get into that. That's
No,
not
I
my
understand,
position.
and I don't mean, but I do, it is concerning because I do see this bill really just targeted at utility scale solar. I mean, when we take the 2 megawatt requirement, at least for now, that's all the community solar is no longer included in this. So it's just utility scale solar projects. And I always question, again, what types of jobs are necessary to build a utility scale solar project. And certainly we see electricians, but outside of that, it is not a large job creator, and certainly doesn't have a number of follow-on jobs, maintenance-type jobs as a result of that. So comments on that, Mr. Kress? Or?
Yeah, I think we can't neglect the offshore wind project, right? So the economic benefit that that's bringing, that has a community benefit agreement to it, that has a prevailing wage provision. These are the additional projects that are in the queue now. That's going to change over time. We know that. And I think you're right. There are limited trades with respect to solar farms. Right. I think the laborers union, I think those folks have a role in these projects. The electricians clearly do. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, this bill would just bring a prevailing wage to your local residents. I mean,
Right.
regardless of the trades.
Well, and that's why I always have a concern. I think that there are a number of very qualified tradespeople out on the Eastern Shore that might not be part of a union, that might not feel it's necessary to pay a prevailing wage in an area where cost of living is cheaper, and yet that's the area where these projects are being cited right now. And as a result, I think there's a conflict, but obviously I can see where this piece of legislation is aimed at. So
Just to respond briefly. So
Sure.
This bill doesn't require a PLA. It doesn't require a union contractor. It requires prevailing wage, which is the medium wage within your county, and that's a requirement for the contractors to pay the local citizens. So
well, there's been a lot of discussion then on what prevailing wage really is, and is it geographically indexed? Are we seeing this, basically the same prevailing wage throughout? Obviously, we debate this all the time when it comes to school construction projects. There is a growing concern of that, and unfortunately, I'm not saying your answer is incorrect, but we have seen different answers all the time when we talk about geographical index on prevailing wage. So
The only thing I would say is that the committee could go to the Department of Labor website right now, and you can query what the wages are in your individual county. I know for laborers, in most of the Eastern Shore counties, around $19, $20. In Baltimore City, it's $25. There's definitely a variance in wages.
okay, good to know. Thank you very much.
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair.
Senator Kramer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Kress just answered what my questions were going to be, that in fact, it is indexed by geographical area so that the concerns raised by the good senator from the Eastern Shore, quite frankly, are not reflective of what costs may be in Montgomery County, and our costs are not reflective of the Eastern Shore, so that clearly the index is lower on the Eastern Shore than it likely would be in Montgomery County. So I understood that correctly, and I think that's what you just stated, correct, Mr. Kress?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going next to Josh Tolkien, Maryland Sierra Club, and then to Molly Knoll, representing the Maryland Public Service Commission, and you each have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Matt Mullen on behalf of the Sierra Club. Josh Tolkien is caught up in another committee, if I may, Madam Chair. Sierra Club simply wanted to voice their support for this bill. They appreciate the sponsor introducing it. They like what it does. The only thing they'd flag is a question around the community benefits agreement on page 5, line 10. They think there's some questions around, they think there might be some room for specificity there. We've reached out to the proponents of the bill. Happy to talk with the sponsor going forward and participate as this committee moves the bill forward. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go next to Molly Knoll, Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. Molly Knoll on behalf of the Maryland Public Service Commission. We had some concerns with the bill related to the inclusion of storage and then related to a lack of expertise within our agency on the labor-related issues and the post-analysis, but those have been resolved by amendments, so I'm simply available for questions.
Okay, are there any questions? All right, thank you very much. Okay, that ends the testimony on this bill. And we're going next to Senate Bill 524. Senator Feldman's a busy beaver today.
A very busy beaver.
Yes, and he has a panel of Ruth Ann Norton, Raymond Nebo, and Matthew Hargrove. The panelists will have 2 minutes each following the sponsor's
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this issue, this is a little bit of a different issue, covering a lot of different parts of the energy mix here. So this was an issue I raised with the committee last year, but it was late, and we really didn't get an opportunity to fully flush it out. But to refresh everyone's memory for some background, back in 2008, Madam Chair, General Assembly passed the Empower Act, which set target reductions of 15% electricity consumption by 2015. The program was very successful. And in 2017, the legislature, this committee, extended the program and established a new annual energy savings target of 2% per year that Maryland utilities are required to meet. So on this front, Madam Chair, I think Maryland does lead the nation with this very specific target of 2%. And the 2% savings goal is for all homes in Maryland. All residents pay an Empower Maryland surcharge on their utility bill. Utilities play a role in others. The utilities come up with a plan, they go to the PSC, they get approval, they get funds from Empower, and that's how it works. The problem that has emerged, though, Madam Chair, has to do with low, and a new term, I'm going to say new term, because limited income Marylanders who pay a higher portion of their income in energy bills, including the Empower surcharge, yet have a very, very low participation in Power. This group of Marylanders get very, very little out of the Empower program. And quite candidly, I think that's been exacerbated during COVID. So pre-COVID-19, the last data we have in Maryland, limited income residents paid 550% more as a portion of their income on their energy bills than the average non-limited income Marylander. This divide, as I say, is likely grown following the impact of COVID. That results in a term, energy insecurity, for many families who have to choose between energy costs and other necessities. And it's a vicious cycle because when you think about it, it's the older stock homes with deteriorated energy infrastructure, poor insulation already, and other health and safety problems. Those are the problems that have to be dealt with before you get to weatherization. So providing energy-efficient upgrades is simply not a priority. Forced to deal with broken HVAC systems, et cetera. And so that's a problem. The very housing stock we're talking about here with our lower limited income folks, this is just not a priority. There's a racial energy justice component of this issue as well. A majority, 55% of the residents that deal with these issues are Black, Hispanic, Asian families. So there's a racial justice component. And if you look at the Empower energy efficient programs, the last data we had, there was $270 million available in Empower, but only $25 million of that went to the limited income programming that is administered by our Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. Studies have consistently found that using energy more efficiently is one of the fastest, most effective ways to reduce utility costs, helping those lower income households spend less on their energy and playing a pivotal role in overcoming the energy insecurity issue I described earlier. Despite the progress we've made with Empower, with the targets I mentioned earlier and the goals, Maryland, as of today, has no goals whatsoever or any agencies accountable for ensuring maximum energy efficiency dollars make their way to the limited income homes. So in a nutshell, the problem is Marylanders with the highest energy burden in the state have the lowest participation in the Empower programs, get the least benefit from these customer-funded energy efficiency programs in Empower, and there's no mechanism currently to deal with it. The PSC itself has stated in one of its orders that, quote, improving the energy efficiency of low-income households is a critical focus for Maryland, and yet the numbers right now are candidly abysmal, and nothing has happened in the last 5 years since we did that 2017 energy target of 2%. So here in Maryland, we have no energy efficiency goal or target for lower income households like many other states do. So that's the problem. Senate Bill 525 establishes an energy consumption savings target specifically for limited income households in Maryland, like other states, as I said already, do, to be achieved through a low-income portion of the Empower program, which is administered, as I said, by DHCD. So the way it would work is the energy efficiency and conservation programs must achieve an annual incremental gross energy savings of at least 0.4% starting in 2023, and then it ratchets it up, capping at 1% in 2026. Again, that'll eventually get to a 1% number, and it'll help ease the transition and efficiency by treating benchmark goals and accountability among the departments. Now, again, the utilities have an energy consumption target already. What they do is they come up with a plan, and as opposed to the DHCD, there is no plan. They have no targets. So the net result of it is that if we pass this bill, the Department of DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, if we put in place in law this target, they'll be able to also create a plan, just like the utilities do, that details the program so that they plan to implement the costs associated, a description of the steps it will be taking. Under the bill, the department will be accountable. They're going to have to provide updates to various folks, including the General Assembly and the governor every 6 months, demonstrate the progress it's making, and establish, again, we're trying to establish a low-income savings target. Will enable them to go and try to get more of that Empower money. I mean, if there's a chart attached to the committee that I think illustrates part of the problem. So the last data I have is from 2019. The utilities requested $131 million, but only spent $110 million of that. But even of the 110, they were still able to get their 2% savings target. Meanwhile, DHCD tried to get money and got kind of a pathetic amount of money, and there's a huge demand among our low-income population for power services. There's a real disconnect. So bottom line, Madam Chair, we're trying to establish these targets, install energy-efficient measures such as insulation, energy-efficient windows, lighting, boiler replacement, and more. And these will lead directly to reduced energy bills for our limited-income Marylanders, indirectly lead to improved air quality, thermal comfort, and actually during COVID, I do have this statistic, the average electrical usage increased 9 to 10%. So some of the disparities have been exacerbated, no doubt. Another product of these having more dollars flow into this housing stock, weather assistance, in addition to the utility bill reduction, it also helps to preserve our affordable housing stock, which are directed primarily, again, to the same limited income tenants. By putting some of these upgrades there, our affordable housing crisis in our state, I think, that's another byproduct in addition to just bringing down some utility bills. Also, there's a lot of energy efficiency jobs, so there's some good jobs in play. And by the way, if you get your lower utility bills down, it makes your ability to pay your rent a little easier. I mean, there's a lot here, but it's about slicing up the pie a little bit differently. Also, under the bill, the DHCD would give preference to contractors that are minority-owned, women-owned, or veteran-owned when selecting business to help in the procurement process related to Empower. I know Senator Hayes has brought this up in other contexts. So this bill actually has language specifically dealing with that subject. Just a couple of other things. Finally, there's an amendment that I'm offered. Some of you may have gotten an email having to do with an amendment that would remove a restriction on what materials can be used to the thermal insulation as a result of concerns raised by the American Chemistry Council. That removes that restriction. I see Mr. Manis here. That was something that he brought to my attention. As far as the costs, and finally, Madam Chair, I'll just wrap up with this. And I also should make the note that it establishes a green and healthy task force that will analyze and advance the coordination of federal and state resources in this space. There's a lot of federal money in the infrastructure plan coming down the pike, and we need to take advantage of that. So if you look at, when we talk about any cost, number one, the fiscal note writer says you can't really independently verify some of the numbers that they were getting. They themselves can't get the numbers or verify the numbers that they were provided from the Department of Housing and Community Development. With that aside, you'll hear some witnesses that suggest, and I think there's merit to it, that a lot of the federal money that's coming through infrastructures is for energy efficiency and might well cover most, if not everything that I'm talking about here. There are also Medicaid savings involved here. By doing this, you can save on Medicaid dollars, which in turn results in more federal money flowing to the state of Maryland. And finally, with respect to increased costs, the intent here is not to create a broader, bigger Empower program. It's to slice the pie up a little bit differently. I mentioned earlier the utilities went and asked for $130 million, only spent $110, and still found a way to meet their 2% target goal that was in our 2017 bill. So it's not about growing the pie or adding to surcharges. It's about taking the pie that's here and redeploying it to our lower limited income folks in a more just, equitable way. That's really what the goal of this piece of legislation is about. And Madam Chair, with the amendment I referenced earlier, I will stop and ask for a favorable on Senate Bill 418 with that one amendment that I mentioned.
Thank you. Senator Reedy has the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I tell you, you'll get a favorable report from me on some of the goals on this bill. I do have a couple questions. I definitely like helping people lower income people reduce their energy like becoming more energy efficient.
Talking to your mic, Senator.
Sorry. These mics. It's these masks. Can't hear through it. Yeah. Yeah, it's the mic and the mask. I like the energy efficiency ideas. I mean, we definitely want to help people, lower income people, lower their energy bills, energy consumption that's unnecessary. One of the things that I've struggled with, and I wasn't in the committee, as you know, when Power was done, but one of the things I struggle with is we create programs, then we go back and figure out, well, it doesn't really address everything that we wanted it to address, or it's not doing it in the right way. Let's create another program which adds more cost into all of this. So I have a couple questions. One is, mightn't it be better if we exempted lower income people from paying the charge and just give them more money back on their energy bill? And the answer to that preemptively might be, well, that's not going to help promote energy efficiency. Okay. Wouldn't it be better to just have a more direct program for individual people to apply for, to go get something that's more of an energy efficient appliance or make an improvement on their property? Or, I mean, it seems like we're creating a whole... we're creating a whole bureaucracy, another bureaucracy.
Okay, well, actually, I have it the opposite way. You're the one that's proposing a brand-new program. This is taking the existing program. We're not creating a new program here. We're taking the existing Empower program and simply saying, let's have a target like other states do, specifically for lower limited income folks to get out of the already existing Empower program pie.
Okay.
So I would say you're proposing more bureaucracy, more complication. I'm saying take the existing program and divvy it up a little more efficiently and better. So that's how I look at it.
That's a good answer. I would say one of the times when you create fees that everybody pays, no matter their level of income, we end up in a situation where some people are not getting the kind of help that they need.
Since you're asking a question, I'm going to respond to that one. Right now, the very people, the folks in the lower limit income are kind of getting screwed by Empower. They're paying already a disproportionate amount of their income.
I believe a few of us pointed this out when the thing was created, but that's fine.
Well, I don't know. We didn't know back in, whenever 2008. I'm looking at the data now, and I'm saying that right now, the very folks pay a disproportionate amount of their income towards energy are getting almost nothing out of the surcharge that they do pay into.
Right.
And they're not getting anything back. So, again, 2 points. I would say, this not taking creating a new program, but in terms of fairness and all the rest, right now, these are the folks that are, I would say, being treated unfairly under the current setup.
Madam Chair, one follow-up, if I might. I definitely like the aims of the bill. In all seriousness, I think that's good. We definitely want to be sure that we're helping people who need the help the most if this funding is available. We have raised, what I meant was when we've raised the fees over the years, that's come increasingly more on the backs of working class and poor people, as opposed to people in the middle class, upper middle class that can afford it more. But I'm glad we're talking about how to direct it properly. One thing is mentioned, the CEF fund. A lot of this, some of this would some of this come out of the CEF fund, or
I don't know how
there's a letter that talks about how already we're using 45% of the CEF fund.
I don't have any idea where this idea. It has nothing to do with the CEF fund.
Okay.
We have an Empower program that's paid with a surcharge until this is nothing. It's kind of one of those red herring things. The CEF discussion and what we do with the CEF money is an entirely. We've had bills in this committee in the last year or two where we have gone to the CEF. That's a separate conversation.
Okay.
I don't see how that has anything to do with this.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because I saw that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sponsor. The ideas of the bill obviously make a lot of sense. The actual execution of the Empower program has not, as you've said. Was there consideration given to just exempting low-income people from this charge, since they have been paying and getting absolutely no benefit from this for the entire time?
I haven't had that conversation, in the context of this bill. I will say we have probably one of the preeminent experts in our state, and Ms. Norton over here, to maybe talk about, has that been talked about? I'm open. I've identified the problem. Obviously, I'd like to work with the committee to come up with the best targeted approach here. But the panel may have some thoughts on if that topic or that issue, and that may go maybe to where Senator Reedy's coming from as well. you want to be targeted with what you're trying to, in terms of addressing the problem. So I appreciate that question, though.
Okay, thank you. We will
Thank
go
you.
to your panel next, Ruth Ann Norton. You have 2 minutes each. Panel.
Okay. Senator Kelly, what an honor to be in front of you again for my 29th legislative session. And I'm only 32, so. I'm Ruth Ann Norton. I am the president and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. Our work is to address the social determinants of health, opportunity, and equity through creating healthier housing. And GHHI was founded on the principle of looking at energy efficiency as a major mover of health and a way to better align, braid, and coordinate resources to have better and more efficient and more effective government delivery. So I'm not going to go deep into my written testimony, which you all can read, but I do think one thing to understand here is that what this sets up is fair play. It will set up better guidelines, guideposts, and sort of a true north on how we use funding from Empower through the Department of Housing and Community Development. It will actually allow DHCD to have more funding directed to where it is needed most. Our families, our most vulnerable families, where children and seniors who suffer from asthma and COPD and displacement because of poorly weatherized and energy efficient housing. This will allow us to put the money smartly in place. It will also allow the state of Maryland to capture more of the monies that is coming out of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation and current budget, and to use that in a better aligned fashion along with monies from HUD, HHS, and others. It does, in doing this, one of the things that it will have is clearly an impact on energy consumption and energy use. It will address a great need. It will, in fact, level up how we disperse money by who pays in and the proportionality of how it's paid back. But it also will build an important aspect that is needed in the state in the workforce capacity to conduct this work as we move forward in the energy efficiency and climate work and with the money coming forward. But I will tell you that it will definitely create millions upon millions of dollars of Medicaid savings. That will also be an opportunity to be reinvested back through health care, where investing in social determinants of health and health outcomes. We have proven this and shown this in states across the country. I directly work with and advise over 50 U.S. governors and mayors in better utilizing this funding. So I'm happy to answer questions. I would proactively say to Senator Augustine and Senator Reddy that this will, in fact, be a double win, because it will allow us to invest in places that we have high cost in Medicaid and displacement and other monies that we spend because we are not addressing energy efficiency properly in the lowest income housing. And so by better utilizing these funds, we will get a far better outcome than removing the fee entirely. But I'd turn this over to our panel and happy to answer questions, and thank Senator Feldman for a very well thought out bill here.
Okay. Senator Reedy and then Senator Augustine.
May I ask you a question, and thank you for your testimony. You mentioned about we've talked about low-income housing. Of course, it's part of what the bill's about. So as I'm looking through it, I'm just trying to understand. So this will, because obviously there are a lot of people who are poor that certainly don't own their property.
Correct.
So vast majority don't. So what will this do in regards to low-income rental housing? I mean,
it will help to actually stabilize tenancy, and the data shows that in other programs where we have invested in low and moderate income housing, in improving everything from lead paint to asthma reduction to energy efficiency. What it will do, in fact, is create a better and more stable tenancy, because tenants will be able to better afford their energy bills or the energy bills that are being a part of their rent. And it creates a safer and more stable home in which young children and seniors and families can live.
How does that money, though, how does that happen? Because they don't own the property. So how does that money get to, does the landlord apply for it? Does the
landlord
told
does
they have to
apply. The
for it? Or what?
landlord applies based on the income of the residents, not of the income of the property
landlord.
owner, right? And then is able to tap that money because of that.
Or there's already existing program where they can
There-
do that?
there
This is just,
are.
we want to put more money towards that. Is
Yeah,
that
and we
basically-
want to give a better guideline for investment for HCD. And I do think this is coming at a really important time where we're going to double the amount of weatherization assistance money coming to the state because
feds.
From the feds. And so it really does provide better guidelines and guideposts on how do we effectively spend this money.
Because the outreach would need to be to the people who own the properties too, not just to the, I mean, obviously it
That's
reaches
correct.
to low-income
That's
families,
right.
but, okay.
That's right. But I think you'll hear from people on this panel, there is such a great need. There's no shortage of pipeline for the need here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you,
Senator
Senator.
Augustine.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, trying to look through your thank you, Madam Chair. Trying to look through your testimony to get this nexus with the Medicaid savings.
I don't know, I can provide that to you. We've done a number of studies. I actually co-authored sort of the seminal study on Medicaid savings and outcomes for energy efficiency. We did a study with the U.S. Department of Housing and Community Development through the Healthy Homes Technical Studies. We studied 240 families in the Baltimore metro region and 139 children who were on Medicaid, and we lowered hospitalizations and emergency room visits by 66%. We improved school attendance for kids missing 20 days or more because of asthma by 62%, and improved a parent's ability to work by 88%. And this was not vetted. I mean, it was vetted by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Morgan State, Hopkins, and others. This was then replicated in 2018. And we just recently closed on a set of work in the city of New York with Molina Healthcare, where Medicaid is now paying back $5 million worth of investment in energy efficiency to reduce asthma completely by Medicaid savings. But I'm happy, Senator, to provide you sort of this high evidence on this.
Please.
I didn't make it as much a part of the testimony here, but
Yeah, no, you were
since the
just
senator
referring to
raised it, I wanted to.
Yeah, I would, please do. Please do.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
Thank you.
In fact, if I could butt in, if you would just send it to the committee.
Yes, ma'am.
We'll see that everyone gets it.
Yes, ma'am. We'll do so.
All right.
Okay, one more, just to follow up on that, is just, while I was looking in your testimony, I could not find that about the Medicaid. What I did find is what I always talk about in this committee, which is where you talked about African-American households having to make decisions between food, medicine, and energy, okay? And your evidence of that. And so I go back again, why don't we simply exempt low, moderate income folks from Empower so that they can pay for their medicine, so that they can pay for their food, and then I'm perfectly good with having the investment into these communities because they have not been invested for the last, time. It's about time they get caught up. Why wouldn't we do something like that?
Well, I think it's an intriguing idea and one that I haven't thought enough about to give you a fully cogent answer. But in the current schematic, right, what we do know is where people are paying in. It gives us very good data of where to go. So we can align the data to who's paying in and to those households. But it's something that I am willing to give some thought to.
Thank you.
Because I'm well known across the country of saying if your kid's on Medicaid and you're on WIC and you're receiving support from TANF, we have to level the playing field of how we do that in doing exemptions. But I do think where we are today here with Empower as it is, that this bill still needs to be passed, because I think we need to immediately start redirecting and balance the investment while potentially considering that, for which I don't have an answer for you today.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we have 2 minutes each for the other panelists.
Would you prefer to go first?
You can just pull that down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Raymond Naveau. I am the State and Equity Policy Manager at the National Housing Trust. I am a proud Prince George's County resident, and I am someone who grew up in low-income housing that was not energy efficient. And today I'm here in support of SB 524, because had legislation like this existed when I was growing up, the hardships that my family experienced would have been significantly reduced. You see, I was raised by my grandmother, and growing up, we had to move 2 different times because water seeped through our ceilings and caused leaks. We had leaky windows year-round. We had very poor insulation. And because we were on such a fixed income, our methods to make our space bearable were to layer up in the winter or run a fan in the summer. When I was 8, I was diagnosed with asthma. And for the next 15 years, I would have to manage that asthma almost daily, which would mean missed days from school. It would mean spending money that we did not have on transportation to the doctor. And a few years after my diagnosis, my grandmother was also diagnosed with asthma as we developed mold in our apartment. So as we all know, DHCD has already said that households that receive energy efficiency upgrades through their program save on average $400 annually in their electricity bill. However, these are truly just the quantifiable benefits of this legislation. Committing to policies that further racial equity and environmental equity as a path to justice are truly priceless. So I've shared this story, my grandmother's story. It's a tragic one, but it's not an uncommon one. I see this every day in my community, and I'm sure many of you have also seen this in yours. So as a country, as we begin to move towards prioritizing racial justice and environmental justice, I really look forward to seeing Maryland follow suit and make this commitment to its residents and to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then finally, we have Matthew Hargrove.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Members of the committee and Madam Chair. My name is Matt Hargrove, and I am the president of a company called Total Home Performance located on the eastern shore of Maryland, out of Easton. We've been fortunate enough to be part of the Weatherization Assistance Program and also Empower programs, working both with DHCD and local nonprofit agencies since 2010, weatherizing approximately almost 5,000 homes. And grown our company to a size of almost 62 employees doing that. So, we have certainly seen and learned a lot in that time. For one, being I started the business when I was 23 years old, so being a part of the program was obviously very beneficial to my business, but not as beneficial as it was to the people that we were helping in the process. It's been one of the most rewarding things that I thought that I didn't know I was destined to do in my life, but clearly here I am, having served this many people. And so clearly I am in favor of Senate Bill 524, any bill that will help us achieve more energy-saving goals, serve more low-income residents of the state of Maryland, is absolutely something that I'm for and is much needed. If you could see, a company like mine based on the Eastern Shore, there's others much like me, and we do have the capacity to handle, fulfilling the need of servicing more residents of the state of Maryland. And as part of the work that we do and the contracts that we have through DHCD, we work with a number of different minority businesses. So our kind of, the economic benefit of not only the employees that I have that work within the program, but I know for a fact of the HVAC companies that we work with, that we keep at least 2 of their crews busy, our electrician. So our reach is much beyond just our company alone, but it's also for the trades, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC with the work that we do. But thank you, and appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we have, yes.
Say that Matt today also brought his new 3-week-old son to see him testify.
Yes, Arrington's back there somewhere.
Well, he's well behaved.
With his mother like he should be, okay.
Okay, all right.
Oh, yeah, that'd be something.
All right, we have 2 additional persons to hear, Lucy LaFlame and Nick Manus.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Nick Manus with Manus Canning and Associates, here today representing the American Chemistry Council, and I want to thank Senator Feldman for working with us and providing amendments that take care of our concern as it relates to types of insulation that you could use in this program. Thank you.
Okay, all right, and Lucy LaFlame.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chairman Feldman, and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Lucy LaFlamme. I am with the Natural Resources Defense Council. I want to use my 2 minutes just to explain why we're here and asking this particularly of this committee and the legislature. As referenced before, as programs go on, particularly as MPower has gone on, we have seen how effective it can be in terms of overall energy use reduction, in terms of cost. It turned out to be a whole lot less cost heavy than we thought it was going to be originally. However, during this same period of time, we have also learned some of the problems, and that is the inequity of MPower, as we have been discussing this entire time. So one of the things we have tried as advocates, as many of my partners that have already spoken, to work through the Public Service Commission's process. We have participated in 2 separate low-income working groups. We have filed comments semi-annually tracking the progress of how Department of Housing and Community Development is going, funding levels, participation, marketing. We have been working for about 7 years through the PSC to try to get this established. There is a general consensus that we do need to do something and that currently MPower is inequitable. However, when you have stakeholder groups trying to come up with how to do this, and it is consisted of advocates, utilities, Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as the Office of People's Counsel, to no surprise, it's been hard for us to figure out exactly what to do and to reach consensus on it. And at this, even at one of the recent hearings, one of the commissioners themselves said they are waiting for the legislature to tell them to do this, which is what has brought us here. So we have tried very diligently to get this done through the process laid out by the PSC. And the last one I want to make quickly is there is a lot of different things happening around climate. The state is moving forward in a number of different ways. The Maryland Commission on Climate Change has put forward a very comprehensive set of recommendations of what the state should do, including getting low-income housing entirely retrofitted by 100% of them by 2050. Our bill will not get us there, but it will be a start to getting us there. As of now, it's, I think, out of the 21% statewide residents that fall into the low limited income category, only 9% of them have gotten any sort of improvement. We are very far, far off from that goal, but we have programs in place and we have steps to help get us there, and that's why I strongly urge you to support this bill.
Thank you very much. Okay, that ends the testimony on this bill. Senator Feldman, you're up again for Senate Bill 525. And let's see, you've got a panel of Gary Griffin, Victoria Venable, and David Lapp. If you guys would come up to the table And when the senator is finished, you will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just say at the outset that I am working on several amendments, and the bill is likely to be pared down quite a bit from where it is or how it was originally introduced. And some of the opposition you'll see in your testimony in opposition is directed to the bill as it was introduced. But let me just talk in broad terms about the importance of the bill. And at the end, Madam Chair, what I am going to say, because I have been dealing with the House Economic Matters Committee, which held a hearing on this some weeks ago. It's in the subcommittee. I'm going to suggest that we ultimately hold the bill and let the House work on this and see what, if anything, emerges from the House first before we take action here. But I have to say this is an important topic. And we have here our Office of People's Counsel. Now, he is testifying in support of the bill. He wrote a piece last week on this very bill. And if you haven't taken a look at it, I'd urge you to take a look at it. It was on February 10th. And it lays out, I think, the case for the broad contours of why this legislation is so important. Yesterday, somewhat surprised that our Public Service Commission Chair, Stanek, then wrote a response of his own in the Maryland Matters. And I have to make a point before I get into the bill here, Madam Chair. I just want to remind the committee, I think it's important that we are the policymakers and not the PSC. And there was a time not that long ago when the PSC would not take policy position. They actually wouldn't even come in here and take strong positions in support or opposition to bills. They would send in letters of information or letters of concern. But increasingly, the PSC is weighing in on policy calls, supporting opposing bills, which I just put that by way of background. The back and forth with our Public Service Commission chair weighing in response to the Office of People's Counsel in articles in Maryland Matters about what policy should be. So that's just a little commentary, Madam Chair. Let's start with the basic point here. So our electric distribution system is part of the energy grid that is regulated by the PSC. It's our poles, our wires, our transformers, substations that supply electricity to our communities. And so as we continue to move towards clean energy, electrification of our buildings and transportation systems, cities generating their own hydropower, battery storage, we're moving away from an era when power plants were centralized, were powered by fossil fuels, and we're in the midst of a fundamental change of how energy is distributed. So in doing that, we also need to be mindful of doing this in a way that does not increase the cost of electricity to ratepayers. We just talked about energy efficiency in the other bill. But it's imperative. It's imperative that we upgrade our energy grid and its load capacities. For all the talk, we talk today about climate solutions, all the climate change bills, electric vehicles, community solar, renewable. It all requires that we get it right when it comes to making smart investments into the future, about upgrades to our distribution grid. If there was ever any doubt about how important it is to upgrade, modernize the grid in terms of resiliency when it comes to extreme weather conditions as a result of climate change, we don't have to look any further than what happened in Texas just a year ago with massive outages. So this is a hugely important topic. Right now, with the passage of the infrastructure bill in the United States Congress, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here in Maryland. We're positioned to receive a large influx of funds for electric distribution grid upgrades in order to deploy and invest those dollars in a smart way and to move us forward towards meeting our energy policy goals. Like everything else, it requires some thinking, some planning. You just can't wing it. And on that point, Madam Chair, I believe the General Assembly should play an important role in that planning. It's not all about the PSC. It's not all about the utilities. Another aspect of this in terms of those funds, so these funds from Congress, just to be clear, are going to start rolling out in May of 2022 and are going to run until 2026 or until the money runs out. And some of it's going to be doled out proportionally based on sort of the size of the state, but some of it's going to be competitive. And the states that put together the right kind of energy grid infrastructure will likely be the states that receive more of the federal dollars over the next several years. We want to invest dollars to modernize our distribution grid intelligently, not in technologies that will quickly become obsolete or are in conflict with other policy goals enacted by this state legislature. As we speak right now, the PSC is approving plans for additional distribution system spending involving hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And basically doing that with virtually no policy direction or guidance from the General Assembly, the policymakers, very little transparency or accountability. The utilities and their spending plans for electric distribution grid may be good for their shareholders, but they may not be good for ratepayers, may not be in accord with, or may even be in conflict with the policies being enacted by this legislature. And these spending plans ultimately get passed down to the ratepayers. As I said earlier, this potential federal funding streams coming down is monumental. The legislation, Bill 525, which I'm going to describe in a second, is designed to position Maryland to maximize the amount we get, deploy those federal funds in the most intelligent, forward-looking policy way with Maryland General Assembly input, and we need to get this right to do all the things we talk about on the policy front. Just to give you some numbers, this bill provides, that's the United States congressional bill, the infrastructure, $5 billion to support grid hardening grants geared towards increasing resilience. $6 billion in grants to state and local governments and public utility commissions to demonstrate innovative approaches to transmission, storage, and distribution. $3 billion expansion of the Smart Grid Matching Grant Program for enhancing grid flexibility, including investments in distribution systems, microgrids, and vehicle-to-grid technologies, and several million for the state energy program. In the end, Madam Chair, the more federal dollars we can get and deploy intelligently, it's much less for our ratepayers to have to pay. This is helpful to our ratepayers. It's a downward pressure on Maryland ratepayers the more federal money we can get in. So specifically on Senate Bill 525, what exactly does it do? Number one, it requires the PSC and the Maryland Energy Administration will apply for, coordinate the access of federal funds available through the infrastructure plan. Now, you'd assume that's happening already, but the incentive system to actually go out and try to get that federal money is not as obvious as it appears. There's a section of the infrastructure bill that explicitly makes funds available directly to the public utility commissions around the country. It's not clear to me that our PSC at present is really doing anything to try to grab that money. In North Carolina, for example, their PSC actually issued an order right after the infrastructure plan was passed, explicitly directing the state and the utilities to go after the federal money and publicly state how they are going to use and allow others. And they actually, in the same order, said others could comment. So we have nothing, to my knowledge, going on like that here with our PSC. Number two, it requires the distribution system planning to support the state goals of decarbonization, greenhouse gas reduction, renewable energy, equity, family-sustaining employment, energy resiliency and reliability, and cost effectiveness. Third, requires the PSC to establish regulations to ensure the distribution system planning supports the modern grid with clean energy equitably distributed and with resilience to withstand extreme weather events. Fourth, creates transparency by requiring an annual report from the PSC. Next, like in some of the other bills we talked about, supports family-sustaining jobs by requiring distribution grid projects offer prevailing wage, health care and retirement benefits, participate in apprenticeship programs registered with the state, develop a plan to recruit and retain Maryland residents, including women, minority individuals, and veterans. Again, a recurring theme here. Good jobs mitigates the shifting of health coverage, health and other costs to the taxpayers, higher supply of apprenticeship programs, higher wages, economic opportunities, and then the economic multiplier effect back into local communities. And this is not unique to Maryland. Right now, Nevada, New York, California, Illinois, Maine, and Massachusetts have already established distribution planning processes and have all enacted legislation, the General Assembly, the legislature, to set parameters, because we are the policymakers. Now, the opposition is to some extent directed at the bill as introduced. The regulation timelines that are in the bill, the PSC had some concerns about that. They say that it's too quick a timeline. That's easily manageable. That would be part of the amendments that I'm talking about. The language is too prescriptive in some areas, I think they believe, and I think, again, the deadlines can be adjusted. The guidance language can certainly be adjusted to be a little more generic, and I have, I believe, amendments that would address those issues. The main issue, as far as I can tell at this point, has to do with the bill as introduced had talked about a stakeholder planning work group in the bill. And I think, and the Public Service Commission has argued, and others in the testimony you'll see argued, that having that kind of work group is duplicative of what the PSC is already doing. There was $500,000 already allocated for a work group at the PSC. The idea of the original bill as introduced was to create a stakeholder group, was to complement the PSC work group, not work in conflict. And the reality is we're going to have a new PSC chair likely next year, and there's no certainty about a PSC work group. But that aside, Madam Chair, I'd also note that just last week, New Hampshire, their PSC started a work group with no statutory requirements, no input from their legislature. And New Hampshire last week pulled their plug on that work group, and it's basically now run by the utilities. So there's a reason for us to be involved. That said, under the amendments I'm describing, I think that we would likely get rid of a formal work group, have something informal, again, to complement what's happening at the PSC. But far more importantly, and this is how I started this, Madam Chair, the PSC's already said, though, that their work group, the utilities will retain primary control of distribution planning in that work group. And I'm simply arguing that any planning structure we're talking about should have policy input from the General Assembly, as opposed to a planning structure and policy calls being made entirely by the PSC, its appointed work group, led by the utilities and their policy priorities, with no guidance or input from the General Assembly. And that's what Senate Bill 525, along with everything else I've mentioned, is trying to achieve. Finally, one thing, a somewhat parallel legislation I had some years ago was the Electric Service Reliability Act. That was post-derecho. There were all the power outage. We found then that our utilities were in the lowest quartile in terms of reliability. And we put that bill in. Basically, we didn't think the utilities were making the investments necessary. So that bill set reliability standards and economic consequences if those standards were not met. The utilities didn't like it. The PSC didn't like it. But the fact is, it passed, it worked, it brought reliability up. And so sometimes, Madam Chair, legislative action and legislative input are necessary to move things in the right direction. I think that's what the goals of Senate Bill 525 are. With all that, as I said, I continue to have conversation with the PSC, the House Economic Matters Committee, all the stakeholders, and I would urge that we not move on this bill until we see what, if anything, happens out of the House Economic Matters Committee on this bill. But I think this is an important topic at an important time, with literally hundreds of millions of federal dollars flowing into this space, and I think the General Assembly needs to have some input. It can't just be about the PSC and the utilities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let me ask you, could you foresee perhaps some members of ECM and some members of this committee being integrated into, if the PSC is willing, into the work group that they have, working with them all the time, so that they get an additional perspective that's very important, and we know what's going on as they make decisions going along.
Madam Chair, I think, I'm open to, and I think the committee and the General Assembly should be open to any creative ideas like that. I think we should continue that kind of conversation. I think that's along the right lines. My concern is we're, kind of, they're driving the train and we're not involved, and there's a lot at stake here about the future, and I think some model like that, I think you're asking the right kind of questions, as I guess I'd put it that way.
Thank you. All right, I don't see other questions at this time, so we'll go to the panel. All right, and each of you has 2 minutes. Gary Griffin, Victoria Venable, and David Lapp.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and distinguished committee members, my name is Gary Griffin. I'm a proud 42-year member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and a proud lifelong resident of Maryland. I'm obviously here today to support Senate Bill 525. It's going to be tough. The Senator covered it very well. It's going to be tough to give you much more information, but I'll be very brief. With the financial support coming to the states from the federal government via the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, this bill is a great opportunity to put into place legislation that will, far into the future, help workers and various minority employers in Maryland, which will in turn help strengthen our communities, which will strengthen our state as we strengthen the electrical grid in Maryland. Maryland has for far too long relied on energy imported from other states. Maryland residents deserve the good-paying jobs and benefits that the labor standards in this legislation will provide as we improve and expand the electrical grid in Maryland. This bill will be an investment in the future of Maryland's working people, employers, and energy independence and resiliency. In closing, I respectfully request that you support Senate Bill 525 by giving it a favorable report. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. All right, who's going next?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee. David Lapp, Office of People's Counsel. Our office strongly supports Senate Bill 525 to require the Public Service Commission to hold a distribution planning proceeding and to adopt regulations. I will reiterate that Senator Feldman did a great job explaining the bill. We think this bill is key to enhancing Maryland's electric system to meet the needs of and desires of consumers, as well as to achieve the state's climate goals. I'll just address three quick reasons why the General Assembly should act now. And without action, there's a great risk of delay or missing the potential benefits of this legislation. First, while the Commission has initiated a distribution planning work group process, and we welcome and are participating in that process, the scope of the Commission's process, its goals, the timing, and the outcome remain very uncertain. It's not unusual, and you just heard this from the previous panel, for the Commission to have work groups that debate matters for many years. The reference in the previous panel was 7 years on low-income mechanisms for Empower. That's not unusual. We could be here 7 years from now without much progress. The second reason legislation is necessary is to avoid what Senator Feldman referred to, avoid undue deference to the utilities. The Commission has stated that utilities should retain primary control of distribution planning. That's largely the way the process has gone so far. We need to understand utilities are motivated to increase returns for shareholders. There's nothing wrong with that. That's their responsibility. Their system planning will reflect that motivation. And they make earnings by spending on capital, by investing customer dollars. If we unduly defer to the utilities, we could end up investing in multiple flip phones over time. What we need to do is carefully plan for the future and make incremental investments toward the smartphone. We will save costs for customers, and we will get there faster. So it should be the state policymakers that guide this process, and that's the General Assembly. The third point, very simple. and Senator Feldman covered it very well, and that is that this bill will make it more likely for the state to reap the benefits of the federal infrastructure bill. I want to thank Senator Feldman for his leadership on this. You have our written comments, you have the op-ed in Maryland Matters, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Your testimony I find very helpful. I sort of agree we've got to be involved in from the very beginning. Let me ask if Senator Feldman were to amend his bill to suggest that we take the lead, which other states that have gone ahead have followed a pattern or a model, a movement that you think would be worth our considering?
There are several states that are well ahead of Maryland. New York is one, California is one, Massachusetts, Connecticut. These states are all well ahead of Maryland. And there are others.
Okay. Thank you. I would just say aloud, colleagues, and I'm calling Senator Hershey, is we might have time to ask NCSL for the summer meeting to have a hearing on something like this to see if we couldn't get some other states helping us to work on a model that maybe several states would find beneficial. Okay, Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, a lot's been said about these federal funds. Who gets these federal funds and who controls who spends them?
There's different buckets of federal funding.
Right.
Some, my understanding is directly to the utilities, and some requires some public utility commission. I mean, in our states, the Public Service Commission that has to facilitate that.
So when they say that all of these funds are available to the state, the Maryland's Public Service Commission would actually retain those funds, and they would make decisions on how that's distributed?
I'm going to have to get back to you on more of the specifics.
Right.
The federal statute does require PUC involvement. I'm not sure how the funds flow, whether they flow directly to the utilities, and I'm not even sure that that's been decided yet.
Okay. Do you know, we've talked about resiliency, but what about upgrades to a system that's based on increased capacity? So have we determined if federal funds are available for that and can be used for that? Or how would you see anything with that?
My understanding is that it's not limited, so that federal funds could be available for that. The language in the federal bill is fairly broad.
Okay.
I think there's going to be further guidance.
All right, last question, and I just read this in here. Do you know what a least regrets investment is?
A least regrets investment would be a decision to invest in a technology that is going to, say, advance the state's climate goals, that makes sense even if the climate goals were not there. So, for example, there may be investments in, I mean, we talked earlier about natural gas infrastructure. So there may be certain natural gas investments where it would be make more economic sense to electrify than to do the gas, even without a decarbonization policy. And so the idea, I think, there is to identify those sorts of investments that make sense just purely on economic grounds without regard to climate policy.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't heard that term before, so I appreciate your response. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And then Victoria Venable. You can pull it further.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the opportunity to express my support of SB 525. I'm not going to be too repetitive about what other folks have said, but my name is Victoria Venable, and I am here as the Maryland Director of Chesapeake Climate Action Network and CCAN Action Fund. What I really want to focus on today is that critical window of time that we're talking about. For one, I'm sure you've heard from folks like myself and my colleagues in the climate movement about how the 2020s are a decisive decade to make meaningful changes as far as emissions and action to avoid a climate crisis. But what you also need to know for this specific piece of legislation is that there's a pivotal window that started in November of 2021 when Congress passed that Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This law, as we've said, is bringing large investments of energy for energy infrastructure into the United States, one of the largest in United States history. So this makes 2022 not only a year of urgency, but also a year of opportunity. I want to address some of the questions we've heard already about where these funds could go. What's really important here to know is that many of these grants and programs are going to be allocating funds based on competitive merit-based grants that may even require that states are demonstrating that they have commitments to carbon reductions, that they have renewable energy deployment standards and labor standards. So what SB 525 can do to help position Maryland in that situation is preparing for this window of opportunity by defining exactly what our state goals are and providing the support and guidance that the Public Service Commission distribution planning process may need to be competitive as these funds reach the states. It's also important to keep in mind that we actually are in a window of time that is in statute with that bill from Congress, because many of those grant programs have about 180 days after the law was enacted. So that puts us in May of 2022. So if we don't pass something this year, we have a period of time where the funds will be eligible, or the funds will be available for other eligible states and perhaps not for Maryland. Some other states have also seen how the distribution planning process can go awry if there is not specific statutory guidance. The Senator Feldman spoke about New Hampshire. What we really also need to keep in mind is that when we have a process that does not go as planned, or when there's not meaningful stakeholder engagement, what we see is ratepayers paying for that missed opportunity. Every dollar that we get from the federal infrastructure package helps us reduce how much we have to rely on ratepayers for paying for that. So thank you so much for your consideration. I want to thank the sponsor for his collaboration with the Public Service Commission working on those amendments. And with all that, I urge a favorable vote from the committee on SB 525.
Thank you. Don't be surprised if the sponsor doesn't contact some people to see if we could get a 1 or 2 week work group going, so we can decide what really needs to be done with what we would send to the floor. Yeah. Okay, and what the other house is willing to assist with. Thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay, that ends the testimony on this bill. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, we do. We have some unfavorables. Oh, okay. All right. Before that, we've got Jeffrey Guido. And then following Mr. Guido, we'll have Molly Knoll, Sandy Grace, and Dave Schatz. And everybody has 2 minutes each.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. I'm not going to belabor my position. Building trades support the bill because we want the labor standards implemented on this type of work, and we ask for a favorable vote. In my testimony, written testimony, I've bulletized the labor standards that we're looking for, and we hope you'll support them. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you can move those mics along.
Good afternoon again. Molly Knoll. I'm a senior commission advisor with the Maryland Public Service Commission. Chairman Stanek apologizes that he can't be here today. He is actually at a conference right now where Secretary Granholm is presenting how state commissions can access the infrastructure funds. I'm here today to urge an unfavorable review of SB 525's distribution system planning requirements. As Chairman Stanek explained in his op-ed yesterday in response to OPCs, the PSC is working on system planning, and this bill could derail those efforts. The Commission has been on this for many years. We've been working on grid modernization. We've been working on distribution system planning. In the past year, we've held public technical sessions. We've held work group meetings. We've convened our work group. We've had legislators attending our work group meetings and our educational sessions. All of these are open to the public. We'd welcome any input that anyone wants to provide in those processes. In that process, we have come up with a lot of the policies that are in this bill, specifically increased stakeholder engagement in the system planning, as well as aligning utility investments with state policy goals. This legislature is incredibly important in giving us policy guidance and has been doing that in a number of ways for many years. And that's what we're trying to use when we're guiding the system planning that we're looking at right now. However, presupposing the outcomes of the work group with specific regulations on a laundry list of topics is more likely to be counterproductive than productive at this stage of the process. SB 525 would require regulations on distributed energy resources, storage, building and transportation electrification, decarbonization, non-wires alternatives, demand response, resiliency, adaptation to climate change, equity, labor standards. I'm probably missing a couple. The adage goes that you can have something done well, done quickly, or done cheap. And in this instance, I sincerely doubt you can have all three of those. We're more likely to increase costs for ratepayers and compromise outcomes with this bill than we are to achieve the goals of this group. The Commission is well aware that utility investment decisions have long-term consequences and that preparing the grid to combat climate change is going to be incredibly complex and needs to start now. However, rushing this process and codifying a nearly impossible list of burdens on distribution system planning is unlikely to serve Maryland in the long run. And lastly, I simply want to address the point of whether or not this legislation is necessary for us to access the IIJA funds. I believe the utilities are going to speak to their side of the equation, but Maryland has a record of achieving, of securing federal assistance where appropriate. In the last year, we've achieved a DOE Solar Fellow who worked with the Commission for a year. Right now, we're receiving technical assistance from the national labs on a number of current issues in front of the Commission. With the 2008 legislation, we also received assistance that allowed us to have full-time staffers that we did not have to pay for. So we are able to access this money without this legislation, and I can assure you that we're committed to doing so.
Let me just say that we are not going to be totally irrelevant. Where
Absolutely
this
not.
is concerned. And who in the General Assembly is in your work group?
Delegate Charkoudian has attended several of our sessions.
Well, one person is not going to represent the whole General Assembly.
Absolutely.
And we need to be brought up to date within the next couple of weeks because we need to be able to act on something that we agree makes sense for the state of Maryland before we leave here.
Absolutely.
So please tell the chairman to contact the sponsor so we can be brought up to date on what you're thinking, and also that you get input from the entire General Assembly, all the committees of jurisdiction.
If I may, Madam Chairman, when we look for input from the General Assembly, we look at codified laws. So when we are looking at where the state's going on climate change, or where the state's going on infrastructure investments, or where the state's going on energy efficiency, and we look at utility cost recovery, we look to support those goals in what we give to the utilities and incentives for how they're managing their systems.
Well, considering you haven't contacted this side of the General Assembly regarding this very important issue, and we have legislation before us, which probably is long from being perfect. The sponsor admitted he's working halfway in the dark because, in fact, there was no outreach to us in this regard.
We've been in extensive contact since the summer with the sponsors of these bills. I apologize if we haven't done additional outreach.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, just in all fairness, I'm going to, we have chatted. I think, so I don't want to leave it with the fact that there hasn't been any contact at all. So in all fairness, we have done a few Zoom calls here and there with Delegate
Contact is
Charkoudian.
one thing, really working with us is another, and that's what we're talking about. We've
Yes,
got to
ma'am.
be involved. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next person.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Vice
Can you
Chair.
pull that a little closer to you?
Sure. How's that, better? All right, good afternoon again, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Feldman, and honorable members of the Senate Finance Committee. Again, Sandy Grace on behalf of BGE in respectful opposition of Senate Bill 525. I'll start my testimony by noting that Maryland has been recognized as a leader in grid modernization, ranking third in a most recent GridWise Grid Modernization Index. This bill, although it's well-intentioned, would undermine and delay a commission process that's well underway to examine distribution system planning. I just wanted to note that in the order where the commission set out the process associated with that work group process that's currently pending, it noted that a goal was to increase opportunities for early, meaningful stakeholder engagement through increased transparency and coordination. This workgroup process is open to all stakeholders, and I'll note that some of the proponents of this legislation have been participants and are participants in that workgroup process. This bill, were to be enacted, would impose prescriptive requirements that hamper the Commission's discretion to respond to both challenges and opportunities with respect to the grid planning. When we think about distribution planning, while it does take into account policy objectives, which is really important, it's also largely an engineering exercise. And so given that complexity, the regulator has to have the discretion, of course with the General Assembly's guidance, to oversee the utility planning process while considering evolving policy objectives, and then not reduce the flexibility to influence the technical aspects of the planning. As it relates to access to IIJA funding, IIJA is a tremendous opportunity to invest federal funds in the electric grid, but this legislation is not necessary to access that federal funding. Our company has a strong track record of leveraging the opportunity of federal funds to decrease the costs of investments for our customers. A recent example was our effort to achieve a federal grant to reduce the cost of smart meters for our customers by $200 million. So anyone who represents that utilities are not incentivized to seek funding for the benefit of our customers, that's inaccurate. It helps support affordability and manage costs for customers when these grants are available.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you to finish off line. You almost...
Absolutely.
Well,
I'll just want to note in closing, Madam Chair, that we've already started reaching out to state, local, municipal partners with respect to applying for grant funding. The applications are due in May, and so this law, were to be enacted, would not even take place until October. So with that, we urge the committee to issue an unfavorable report.
Okay, let me just say that if you notice, the sponsor began by saying he knew this wasn't a perfect bill. Bills are proposals, and they seldom start out looking like the finished products. But this House and this Senate have to be involved. And we are not just going to roll over because you guys went ahead without formally inviting us to be a part of the planning process. So we hope the chairman will get right back to us. We work with him on a lot of things very well, but the people of Maryland have elected 2 houses members, and this is one of them. And on this issue, we have to be involved. We can't just be an afterthought. And so you can take that back to him. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dave Schatz, and I'm here on behalf of PEPCO and Delmarva Power and Light, and I'll keep my testimony very brief. I think the other witnesses here have covered it very thoroughly. I will just add that NARUC and NASIO, 2 key bodies that standardize a lot of practices across the electric and distribution system planning process, have come forward with standard processes after long deliberation across state energy officials and also Public Service Commission members, including Commissioner O'Donnell as part of that task force, to come forward with standard processes. And it's that report that has come out within the last year that's guiding a lot of the action at the Commission. And it does include a tremendous amount of transparency and a lot of what is in this bill. And so the intent of the bill does align. I believe a lot of the intent aligns or the policy points align. It's just that this working group is already ongoing. I absolutely understand the position of the chair and look forward to contributing to that conversation with all stakeholders as part of this working group process. This is a very technical area of grid planning and grid modernization, and we're looking forward to engaging that process with all stakeholders. And I concur with my colleague from BGE. There's a lot of effort underway at Pepco and Delmarva Power and Light to maximize federal dollars going into transformational projects. And the two different routes that have been discussed here today, both through the state and in partnership with the state, and working with the federal agencies as well to access as much funding as possible. We have a long track record of doing so. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going finally to Senate Bill 526, Senator Feldman, electricity, offshore wind, renewable energy credits. And could I ask Christina Montgomery and Katie Nash to come to the table when the sponsor is
Okay.
done, then you will have 2 minutes each.
Madam Chair, this concludes the bills from Feldman for today and the bills. So I think this is back to we started with a pretty straightforward bill. This is back to, we're going to conclude with a very straightforward bill. Just by way of a little bit of a background, so the committee's worked hard over the years to encourage development of offshore wind energy, and we, I think, have recognized that offshore wind is an important economic driver for jobs in our clean energy future. Our legislative work to enact policies to promote offshore wind began in 2013 when we passed the Maryland Offshore Wind Energy Act, which established the first round of offshore wind procurement for Maryland, along with a payment mechanism that involved offshore wind renewable energy credits that we call them ORECs for offshore wind projects under the Renewable Portfolio Standards. More recently, this term in 2019, I brought to this committee the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which we passed. And as you may recall, among the more important policy initiatives in that legislation was the establishment of a second round of offshore wind procurement. Our Public Service Commission oversees the procurement of offshore wind projects, and it's up to them to approve the projects for the ORECs. The PSC has submitted a letter of information that provides this history and the status of their awards in both rounds of procurement to build offshore wind. And now an important distinction between ORECs and other renewable energy credits. ORECs are fixed cost. They're fixed costs by the PSC. They're not market driven like the other RECs that are part of the Renewable Portfolio Standards. So Senate Bill 526 does not change how ORECs work, not at all, only who administers and handles the payments. So right now, the PSC right now has to coordinate with more than 200 suppliers to collect OREC payments. And under 526, they'll only need to work with the utilities to collect the funds. So we've had multiple delays over the past several years with offshore wind projects, and flaws in the current overly cumbersome construct we've have been actually exposed. So there was a 2020 proceeding at the Public Service Commission that discussed some of this and how these flaws have driven prices higher than necessary. So the goal here is to come up with a payment structure that provides more certainty and basically is cleaner. Two states that are way ahead of us in offshore wind are New Jersey and Massachusetts, and Senate Bill 526 is modeled on those cleaner payment process structures, again, being used in the offshore wind programs in those two states. So SB 526 would change who is responsible for submitting payments for ORECs to the winning projects from the electric suppliers, which is currently, to the electric utilities. Essentially, the utilities would serve as the payment agent on behalf of the competitive suppliers, and through a proceeding, the PSC would determine the cost for OREC purchases to be collected, when payments should be collected. And again, this is very similar to how New Jersey and Massachusetts is handling it, and how we handle other programs like the Electric Service, the Universe Service Program, the Empower Program, where the utilities are the ones collecting the charges from the customers. So the utilities would enter into a joint contract with a single OREC administrator to handle the accounting, compliance, invoicing, and other administrative issues related to OREC obligations of the qualifying offshore wind projects. I'll let some of the industry witnesses here explain how the change will benefit, but fundamentally, it's reducing some risk for the utility. Basically, by putting it all at the utility level, it's reducing some of the risk out of the system, more certainty into the system, which is a positive thing, and hopefully we'll get some of the delays that we've experienced reduce that. As far as opposition, and you'll see the Maryland Energy Administration has actually submitted testimony favorable. The only opposition that came in early from the utilities, they were not opposed conceptually to being the collection agent, but they do it in other jurisdictions, but they had some issues with the drafting language in terms of the transition language from the current structure to the future being maybe somewhat disjointed. So I have put together some amendments I think addresses a lot of their concerns, and I'll let them speak to whether all their concerns are gone. I think the U.S. Wind raised some concerns as well. They are now neutral. They have a letter of information. Originally they were opposed. So again, I think we've solved most of the opposition concerns. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it over to my panel to explain a little bit how this very simple payment structure change, I think, can be extremely beneficial to get our offshore wind industry moving in the state of Maryland. So with all that and with some of the amendments, I'd ask for a favorable on 526. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any lights, so you may go.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Vice Chairman Feldman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. My name is Christina Montgomery. I'm Director of Retail Policy for Vistra Corp. We're a Fortune 275 integrated energy company with operations here in Maryland. We deliver more than 7,500 megawatts of electric generation to the PJM market. I'm here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 526 and respectfully request that the committee provide a favorable report. In our minds, this is a simple clarification to the existing offshore wind statute. It simply replaces the obligation to collect the cost for offshore wind compliance, removes electric suppliers from that responsibility, and replaces them with the electric utilities. This change is simple, it's straightforward, it makes collecting and remitting payments more streamlined, and as Senator Feldman said, similar to other statutorily mandated programs. We've been involved in several proceedings of the Public Service Commission, which has identified the opportunity to make this a more administratively efficient process. Delays in the construction of the projects create uncertainty in the market as to when costs need to be collected and ORECs need to be purchased. Since everything about this program in terms of the quantity of ORECs and the price is fixed by the Commission, we believe that this lends itself to a more efficient structure. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. All right. So seeing no hands, we'll go to Katie Nash.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Kelly and members of the Senate Finance Committee. Katie Nash on behalf of Vistra. I'll be very brief. We did submit as part of our written testimony a pretty lengthy memo that outlines the issue. If you have any questions, certainly I'll be around to follow up. And I just wanted to give my commitment, as Vice Chair Feldman mentioned, that we'll be working with our utility partners. We've had conversations about what they're trying to do in the language, and we fully support what they're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I understand this. With normal RECs, they're on a competitive market, so you guys can, in a sense, compete for those and potentially drive down the cost a little bit. So that makes sense for the suppliers to participate there. But the ORECs, you said, is a fixed price, right? We determined that in our legislation a number of years ago. Is that, or has the PSC changed that?
Yes, so the offshore wind statute does set a price cap for ratepayers, but ultimately it is at the Commission's discretion to set the cost for offshore wind RECs, so that is handled at the Commission.
That's what it was. So we set the cap in our legislation, but the PSC will determine what that is, and that becomes, as you said, a set price or a fixed price, so no need for suppliers to seek those in a competitive market.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go finally to William Kress and then to Alex Pavlak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bill Kress here today on behalf of the Retail Energy Supply Association and on behalf of WGL Energy Services. In support of the bill, I think you touched on the key points. This is a fixed cost that applies to all rate classes. So, you know, the easiest way to collect that is to put it on the distribution side of the bill. That's what this bill does. It makes it very straightforward. So we support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, seeing no hands raised, I think that ends our.
Mr. Pavlik, you said there was Mr. Pavlik?
Yeah, we called him. Yeah, we called him. Yeah.
Is that him right
Oh,
there?
all right, come forward. We didn't see you when we called you before. Okay. Yeah, I called him.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My testimony today, I wanted to propose an amendment to the Clean Energy Jobs Act. The Clean Energy Jobs Act tasks the power plant program to conduct a 100% RPS study. That's a policy study. With respect, a policy study is premature. That first, it would be very useful to quantify the options. What does a reliable, fully decarbonized electric power grid look like? That question drives everything. You have wind, solar, storage, and baseload. How do these generic technologies fit together to deliver reliable, affordable power, fully decarbonized power? You can't just keep plugging wind turbines in and expect to get reliable, affordable power. There are limits. What I proposed here is an amendment to the Clean Energy Jobs Act that is a task to define the constraints on Maryland's power system. What would a reliable, fully decarbonized power system look like for the state of Maryland? What's the combination? That's in my written testimony. It's a simple modification to the task statement for the existing RPS study. And my hope is that the committee would view this as a amendment to the Clean Energy Jobs Act. Questions?
All right. The one problem we have is it's really not related to the bill that's under discussion at the moment.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for your testimony, and this ends our hearing for this afternoon.